but they're staring. Their eyes like two shiny stones. I see myself, and I look scared and confused. Wait, did they just talk? Why is it loud? Do they wish to run through me? Am I a smoke? Am I the sun? And who decides? Oh, I feel so unstable. Fucking hate these people. How they're making me feel lately. They're making me weird, baby, lately. I feel so unstable. Fucking hate these people. How they're making me love. They're making me love. Why do we keep when the water runs? Why do we love if we're so mistaken? Why do we leave when the chase is done? Don't touch me in here, I'm already gone, baby. Why do we keep when the water runs? Why do we love if we're so mistaken? Why do we leave when the chase is done? Don't touch me in here, I'm already gone, baby. So softly speaking, your words a constant babbling stream. Come from nowhere, where? Come from nowhere, where? Your eyelids paint a chalk, shimmering haze just as you talk. Are you sinking, king? Are you sinking, king? I see that your left arm is ink-stained, and since you're sleeveless, you ain't lying, gives a sly wink. Does he know my loneliness? And then I steal a glimpse of your face as you turn the other way. Now I play your ghost as my ace whenever I'm led astray. Here's my station. Here's my station. When if you say just follow, I stay with you. Here's my station. Here's my station. When if you say just follow, I stay with you. Such an attitude, impatient, gloriously rude. Are you for real? You're not for real. Every breath you take is a violent string that breaks through the curse. Sing. Through the curse, sing. Before you, I had nothing but a handful of sad sense. And this town is dead, my darling. You're the one that reinvents. With my lips till I say a prayer. Long live the fool, kill the king. I am of a newborn anger, and the storm will hear us sing. Here's my station. Here's my station. When if you say just one word, I stay with you. Here's my station. Here's my station. But if you say just one word, I stay with you. Pour que l'orage s'annonce. Pour que l'orage s'annonce. Pour que l'orage
Tout le monde me regarde. À travers mon innocence, je pense qu'il me charme. Ma maîtresse d'école m'a dit que j'étais chez moi. Mais mon papa, lui, pourtant se méfie d'elle. Est-elle fidèle? La France est belle, mais elle me regarde de haut comme la tour Eiffel. Mes parents m'ont pas mis au monde pour toucher les aides. J'ai vu que Marion m'a tweeté de quoi elle se mêle. Je sais qu'elle m'aime, je suis français. Ils veulent pas que Marianne soit ma fiancée. Peut-être parce qu'ils me trouvent trop foncé. Laisse-moi juste l'inviter à danser. Je vais l'ambiancer. Je suis français. Ils veulent pas que Marianne soit ma fiancée. Peut-être parce qu'ils me trouvent trop foncé. Laisse-moi juste l'inviter à danser. Je vais l'ambiancer. Je paye mes impôts moi. Je pensais pas que l'amour pouvait être un combat. À la base je voulais juste lui rendre un hommage. Je suis tiraillé comme mon grand-père, ils le savent, c'est dommage. Jolie Marianne, je préfère ne rien voir comme Amadou et Mariam. Je t'invite à manger un bon mafé chez ma tata. Je sais qu'un jour tu me déclareras ta flamme. Aïe aïe aïe, je suis français. Ils veulent pas que Marianne soit ma fiancée. Peut-être parce qu'ils me trouvent trop foncé. Laisse-moi juste l'inviter à danser. Je vais l'ambiancer. Je suis français. Ils veulent pas que Marianne soit ma fiancée. Peut-être parce qu'ils me trouvent trop foncé. Laisse-moi juste l'inviter à danser. Je vais l'ambiancer. Je suis chez moi, chez moi, chez moi. Je suis chez moi, chez moi, chez moi, chez moi. Je suis chez moi, chez moi, chez moi. Je suis chez moi, chez moi, chez moi. Je suis français, chez moi, chez moi. Ils veulent pas que Marianne soit ma fiancée. Chez moi, chez moi. Peut-être parce qu'ils me trouvent trop foncé. Chez moi, chez moi. Laisse-moi juste l'inviter à danser. Chez moi, je vais l'ambiancer. Je suis français. Ils veulent pas que Marianne soit ma fiancée. Peut-être parce qu'ils me trouvent trop foncé. Laisse-moi juste l'inviter à danser. Je vais l'ambiancer. Je suis noir, je suis beurre, je suis jaune, je suis blanc, je suis un être humain comme toi. Je suis chez moi, fier d'être français d'origine guinéenne, fier d'être le fils de Monsieur Diallo, éternellement insatisfait. À suivre.
Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour. Ça va?
Bonjour.
Okay, welcome everybody. I hope you can all see me and hear me properly. Welcome to the 8th PowerLanguage Conference. Yes, this is number 8. I think Roz was 22 when we started. This is a special conference, of course, because this year it's online, but it's fine. It means we can have more people from all over the world. We'll see who we have. By the way, if you want to use the chat box to tell us where you are in the world, I think we have friends from all over Europe, United Kingdom, British Isles, Australia, and other places. So please use the chat box just to say, and the language you want, bonjour, hola, whichever language you want, to say hello and to tell us where you are at the moment. We have somebody from Bunny 5.
Remember to change to all panelists and attendees, so we can all
Yes, please, when you use the chat function, could you select all panelists and attendees? Otherwise, we will get your messages, but nobody else will, which would be a shame. This is a Zoom webinar. It's slightly different from a Zoom meeting. We have a lot of people from Wales as well. That's good. It's different from a Zoom meeting in the sense that think we're on stage and there's 100+ people in the audience, which is what we have roughly. You cannot interrupt the speaker. You know, you would ask questions, put your hand up maybe or something like that, but you cannot interrupt the speaker, and we can't see you just now. Don't worry, we have organized times, coffee break for example, when we will be able to see you and you'll be able to see each other. But that's a Zoom webinar as opposed to a Zoom meet. Roz will explain a bit more about the practical stuff behind all that. So my name is Richard, maybe I should have introduced myself, and I am in charge at PowerLanguage mostly of training, the training side of things, and I'm the one you see first, but there's a lot of people working with me, starting with Rose.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am loving the chat already. It's going mad. That's brilliant. So so I am responsible for the admin side of things for PowerLanguage, amongst other things. So I'm going to hand you over to our colleagues Nadine and Elise to introduce themselves, and then you'll come back to Richard and I, and we'll go through some housekeeping and the technical side of things. Okay, Nadine?
Okay, so I'm Nadine and I'm talking to you from Brittany, where it's almost sunny today. I am in charge of what we call responsive resources. So cross-curricular resources, embedding content and language, and developing resources at the request of teachers. But doing like Rose, we've become extremely versatile and doing lots of other things. Over to you, Elise.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elise and I'm talking to you from Edinburgh. I'm in charge mostly of the planners and associated resources on the PowerLanguage Schools website, and I help my colleagues with lots of other things, including the courses on PowerLanguage courses, which we're going to talk about today.
That's brilliant. If you can speak a bit up, Elise, that would be good. As you said, Roz, the chat box is going crazy. We've got Angus, West Lothian, Wales, Education Scotland, hello Shona.
Argyll and Bute.
Argyll and Bute.
Dundee. It's wonderful. Falkirk.
Wonderful. Now, do you know how to pronounce this, Roz? It's in Welsh.
No.
Sorry. Anyway, a bit of housekeeping.
Yeah, so as Richard had said, in the chat function window, if you could just make sure that it's set to all panelists and attendees, that's great. You'll be able to see all your messages. We're also going to use the Q&A function as well.
Where's that?
That's at the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
That's fine. We're going to use the Q&A as the PowerLanguage team. We will ask your questions to the key presenter and our other presenters on your behalf.
So at the end of each presentation, during the presentation, you'll be able to ask questions using the Q&A function, and the PowerLanguage team, we will write down these questions, we'll select some of them, and we will ask the speakers these questions at the end of their presentation. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's good.
And as Richard said earlier, we'd be grateful if you didn't use the raised hand option. We think between the chat and the Q&A function, that's probably us covered, I think. Yes.
That's
okay.
great.
So our conference is also being streamed live on the PowerLanguage YouTube channel.
Wow. And just to say, there's somebody called Leo Gandini, who's our ICT specialist, who's behind all this technology, the Zoom webinar, the Zoom Meet, the lovely music. He didn't compose it, but so a big thank you to Leo, who's listening to us and making sure you can hear us and everything's going smoothly.
Yes. And we have our hashtag which is at the start of the chat, which is hashtag PLConf20.
Absolutely, and
So
a lot of people have been tweeting.
tweet away, yeah.
So tweet away, make plenty of noise, please. Joe Dale is with us as well. In fact, we'll be attending one of Joe's webinars early November, I think, Joe, you'll keep me right, use the chat. But as you probably know, Joe has something like 30,000 followers around the world, so please make plenty of noise on our behalf.
Okay. And then I think the last thing for now is just the arrangements for our virtual coffee break. Okay, I'm about to send out an email to everyone. The virtual coffee break is through a Zoom meeting. Okay, yeah. So in that email I'm about to send you now, it contains the meeting ID and also the password which you can use.
So we'll explain again, it's very straightforward. At 11 o'clock we'll stop. Those of you who just want to go to your kitchen, have a cup of coffee and just relax, that's fine. If you want to bring your cup of coffee back and talk to people and see them, and it's an informal coffee break like you would in a conference. Okay, so this is organized on Zoom as well, but Zoom Meet as opposed to Zoom Webinar. Very straightforward, you just copy and paste the details that we're going to send you, and you meet some of the people attending the conference.
So we'll put these details again in the chat window just before 11 o'clock. And if you could be back for 11:25, ready
on the dot,
ready to start at 11:30. Okay.
And just a reminder that they'll have to leave the webinar to go into the meeting, the coffee break meeting.
Yeah, so you leave the webinar, go to the meeting, like you would in a conference. You leave the main room, you go to the kitchen. Remember, the best parties tend to happen in the kitchen, in fact. We don't have any croissants this year.
No.
Quel dommage.
Hopefully we'll be back to normal next year.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think that's us for just now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So what's happening this morning? Starting at 9:15, which we have started with a bit of housekeeping and getting to know us anyway. At 9:30, Ron Kemsis from Vienna will be talking to us. I'll introduce Ron in 5 minutes. We've been chatting with him already this morning. So Ron will talk from 9:30. Very interesting presentation. I went quickly through it last week. Anyway, 9:30 until 10:30. At 10:30, the PowerLanguage team will come up with some updates of what we've been doing over the past few months and what we're intending to do over the next few months. 10:30 until 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock coffee break. Ross has explained that. And at 11:30, we'll travel also from Austria to Edinburgh. We're now going to Highland. And Thea Palu, lovely French name, will be talking about the Digi Hub. So it's about sharing good practice that people have been, what people have been doing over lockdown. Anyway, Thea will talk at 11:30. Then we go to Australia. Very exciting. Nadine, you'll introduce our guests from Australia. After Australia, we are then traveling to Angus.
Yes.
Traveling to Angus, and Jen Reid will tell us more about what they've been doing in Angus. And after Jen, we'll travel to West Lothian, where they have been running their first training program, which was a conference and a training program all in one, where they had, I think, 150 people. So Zoe will talk to us about the West Lothian conference. So it's about sharing good practice, linked to the themes, of course, of the conference. The themes today are online learning, home learning. Ron will talk about that quite a bit. Parental engagement, blended learning, I should have said, parental engagement. And how people have used our tools, the PowerLanguage for Schools, PowerLanguage courses, the PowerLanguage Challenge, how these tools have been used by you, practitioners and education officers, to enhance your teaching during lockdown. Am I forgetting something?
We'll have the option of a virtual lunch at the end of the conference. If anyone would like to stay on and have a chat with us or ask any questions, then we'll be here till 1:30. And again, just use the same meeting ID and password as was available for the coffee break.
Wonderful. We're having a little bœuf bourguignon, but it will just be virtual for you, I'm afraid. Yeah.
And then we will send out a follow-up email after the conference to everyone, just, you know, if we don't have enough time to answer questions. And, you know, if there's anything else you want to ask us, you're welcome to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Difficult questions, just ask Nadine and Elise, and easy questions, that's for Roz and myself. Okay, without further ado, 9:27. Wow, that's good. I'd like to welcome Ron Kemzes, who's currently in Vienna, Austria, where he works at the PH University. There's Ron, yes, and hello, Ron. I think hello. That's it. We can hear you now. I'm delighted to have you, Ron, with us for many different reasons. Number one, we have been working together and with the PowerLanguage team and the LFE team and yourself on a European project, the Action 2 project called ELAPSE, which we will be launching at the SALT conference early November, the 7th of November. And Ron has brought so much to that project. It's been wonderful. He's brought a lot in terms of his brains and knowledge, but also his joie de vivre, I should say. And we really, I think it's fair to say that Ron has become a friend over the months and the couple of years that we've been working together. So delighted to have you with us, Ron, and thank you for taking the time this morning to talk to us. Ron, your session will be, you will share your screen with us and share a presentation with us?
Yes, I will.
Is that going to take about, what, half an hour or so?
Yes, the plan is that I will be talking for about half an hour, and then at the end we have, I think, about another half an hour where we can answer questions and I can show you some practical applications of what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. So please do use the Q&A function, as Roz mentioned. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you go to the bottom, you see there's chat, and next to chat, Q&A. So please ask questions and we'll take a note and you know, we'll moderate that session, the second part of Ron's presentation. Just wanted to say as well, Ron, despite Ron's accent, I don't think you were born in America, Ron. I don't think you're American even.
No, I was not born there, no.
Okay, but Ron has a wonderful American accent. Anyway, without further ado, Ron, over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so hello and welcome everyone from me as well. I'm talking to you from sunny Austria. A little bit about myself. My name is Ronald Kemzes. I'm a teacher trainer here at the University of Teacher Education, as well as the University of Vienna. And part of my job is also to teach my students about technology-enhanced language learning, which is why Richard actually approached me and said whether I could talk a little bit about blended learning and distance learning and the things that we have learned in these trying times because of COVID and so on and so forth. And so I'm very happy to do this because I think there is also a lot of confusion about, you know, what is blended learning, what is distance learning, are these, you know, the same thing or not? And so I will just try to talk about all of these things to give you a bird's eye view, so to speak. So for my talk, I thought I would structure that or I would divide that into 3 parts. First, I would like to talk about a couple of definitions and concepts in order to clear up any confusion, you know, or that might be out there. Then secondly, I would like to focus on the lessons that we have learned here in Austria because of the Corona crisis, the things that have been reported back to me from my students, from, you know, other teachers that I'm working with. And at the end, we will have time for your questions, of course, and I will show you a couple of practical applications depending on what it is that you're interested in. So I hope that's acceptable to everyone. And without further ado, I'm going to dive right in. So the first thing that I would like to talk about are 2 terms which are used quite frequently when we talk about e-learning. And that is synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. Now, these things are not, you know, sensationally new or anything. It's just that they are typically used when we talk about e-learning activities. Synchronous learning implies that learning is happening at the same time, typically with people being in, the same room, the same virtual room, that is. Asynchronous learning, on the other hand, has to do with, providing our learners with e-learning activities that they can do individually, usually, and also typically at home. So whenever I'm using synchronous and asynchronous, this is the differentiation that I'm talking about. Again, synchronous meaning that everybody is working at the same time, learning at the same time. Asynchronous learning that people are doing individual work, typically at home. Right, now let's start with a definition of blended learning, which is unfortunately not a very good one, I'm afraid. Let me just read that back to you. In ELT, blended learning is the term most commonly used to refer to any combination of face-to-face teaching with computer technology, online and offline activities/materials. Now, when we look at this definition, actually what we could infer is that blended learning is basically everything and anything. So what I'm trying to do on the next couple of slides is actually trying to differentiate a little bit when we talk about different kinds of blended or distance learning. So the original idea of blended learning was the following. You would have face-to-face classes, typically offline, so just normal classrooms as we all know them. And usually when you would give people homework, that would include a technology component. So that could be many different things. It could be an e-learning activity that you have set up for them in your virtual learning environment. And that can take many different shapes and forms. So I would say this is probably the most basic idea of blended learning, the way it was intended. And then, of course, you would, basically talk about the things that they had worked on at home in your face-to-face class. And the benefit of this situation would be that they would profit from face-to-face interaction and collaboration, of course, as well as everything that the internet can bring to the whole situation. Right, now when we replace the face-to-face classes, which are typically in a room, with actually people meeting physically together, when we replace that with an online tool, like Zoom webinar or like Zoom Meet, then we would rather speak of distance learning in my book, okay? So distance learning is basically very similar to blended learning. The only thing that you're replacing here now is you're replacing the face-to-face situation with video conferencing tools, I would say. Okay, the rest more or less stays the same. So we have synchronous learning, we have asynchronous learning, all of that stays the same. Now, when we talk about blended learning, we also have to talk about another very important concept, which you are probably familiar with, and that is something which I'm going to show you right now. So I'm sure many of you have seen this model. This is Bloom's taxonomy, basically a model of different kinds of learning objectives, different kinds of cognitive processes that we target with the things that we do in class. And depending on where you are in this taxonomy, that would imply that you are also capable of doing the levels underneath. So for example, when we are at the stage of applying knowledge, that also implies that we must have understood it and we must remember a couple of core facts. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to apply knowledge, okay? All of these different cognitive processes usually take the form of tasks that we develop for our learners. And when we look at this taxonomy here, then it also becomes quite clear that when you teach something new, you cannot start at the top of the pyramid. You would typically always start, in the lower half. So the lower half is also called lower order thinking. Now, this is not necessarily a value judgment as such, because lower order thinking can also be quite complex and challenging. However, it is probably not as complex as its counterpart, and that would be higher order thinking, which is the upper half of the model. Right. Now, why is that important? Well, typically when you look at how teachers how teachers do their job in schools. And I know I'm generalizing. I know that not everybody, is like that, of course. But typically what you find in classrooms is that a lot of the lower order thinking bit happens when people are together in a room and in class. And now some of you might say for a good reason. But on the other hand, it is also very time intensive. Okay, so remembering, understanding, teaching new concepts, new terminology, all of that is something that we would typically do in class. And then there is that part that we call homework. And sometimes homework might even be a little more complex, because now what they have to do is they have to apply the knowledge that they have learned at school. And applying that knowledge is definitely something that is more complex, because they are left to their own devices, so to speak. They do not necessarily have anyone to help them during that stage. And so the idea was now, could we just change that? Could we just turn that around so that it would basically look something like this? That we do the lower order thinking at home, asynchronously, so that students would work on that themselves. We give them different kinds of activities. Maybe we record an e-lecture or an e-lesson that we make available to them. And let's reserve the higher order thinking skills for the face-to-face situation. Why? Because this is the more complex task compared to lower order thinking. And the advantage would be that in higher order thinking tasks, they would then have the teacher to help them, because the teacher is in the room with them, and the teacher can assist, let's say, group work, or can help out if there are any questions. Okay, so this model has become known as the flipped classroom model. And when we talk about blended learning, the flipped classroom or the flipped learning model is something that is very, very common in blended learning. So I just dubbed that flipped blended learning. So basically the idea is what I have just outlined. You use the asynchronous part, the part where they are alone at home, where they're working with e-learning activities in order to work on lower order thinking skills. And you use the part when you are together in class or in a virtual room, such as a video conferencing tool, in order to work on higher order thinking skills, because this is, where you can give them much more help and assistance. So when you look at this model, you can also find traces of two learning theories in there. I know this is maybe not as black and white as I make it out to be, but it's, lower order thinking has this flavor of behaviorist learning, that has to do with remembering, with repetition, with rehearsing, and so on and so forth. Whereas higher order thinking skills typically involve collaboration and group work. So that's a much more constructivist approach towards learning. Right, so it's just important to mention that, because this is a model that is very practicable in teaching. I'm using this model myself in all of my courses, and the feedback that I'm getting from my students is, always very, very positive. So when we add the online component, as I have said before, so when we look at the synchronous bit again, then we might call this flipped distance learning, if you will. Right. To sum up, this is basically what I have talked about in the last couple of minutes. So what you see here is blended learning. On the left, the top left corner is the classic form of blended learning, let's say. And underneath you find the flipped version of blended learning. And on the right, you see the distance learning models, where you see the, let's say, the classic distance learning model at the top, and the flipped version of that at the bottom. And so I think this is hopefully helpful to many of you in order to get your heads around, what kinds of forms blended learning can take, and what we actually mean when we say blended learning as opposed to distance learning, as opposed to flipped learning. Okay, yes, they all have something to do with one another. Yes, they're all very similar, but I think it's useful to actually differentiate them so that we know what we're talking about. Okay, so that's the end of the first part. These were the definitions and learning concepts that I wanted to talk about. I would like to move on right now with some very important lessons that I think we have learned here in Austria from this whole COVID situation and the circumstance that many teachers had to do distance learning or blended learning. And of course, there are also mistakes that happen quite naturally. Not everybody is an expert. Maybe blended learning is not everybody's cup of tea. So I'm reporting back to you very informally right now what I have learned from the last couple of months, okay? Right. So lesson one, course design is crucial. So whenever you are setting up a blended learning course, then you want to make sure that you have particular elements in your course. Now, there's a list of different dimensions that Hockley mentions, which should be part of every blended learning course or any distance learning course. I'm not getting into all of them right now. I'm just trying to focus on the ones that I think are the most important ones, and I'm going to get rid of the obvious ones, okay? So when you are creating a blended learning course, let's say, or any distance learning course, then you have to think about how you're going to provide interaction for your students, okay? It's very, very easy to actually set up e-learning activities and then to send them out to your students, and all of a sudden they have to do all of that by themselves. But I think the challenge here is to actually create a situation in which students can work with one another, where they can interact with one another, despite the fact that they're not in the same room together, despite the fact, that it's not school as usual, so to speak. And when we plan our courses, this is something that you really have to think about first, okay? So what kinds of things could I actually put into my course so that they are able to interact with one another? And now that, of course, depends on what it is that you're using and so on and so forth, and we'll get into that a little later. But that's a very important ingredient. Then the next thing, task design and tools. This is quite an obvious point, but well, let me explain. The idea here is that the task that you develop also is connected to the appropriate tool for that task. I give an example why that is important. When teachers in Austria had to start using e-learning platforms, then many of them panicked and they used things such as, let's say, Moodle, for example. Okay, I'm sure you're probably familiar with Moodle. And because they didn't really know how to use Moodle to their own benefits, what most of them did was they would just open up zillions of forums. And all of a sudden, the students were in the situation that they had to create forum entry after forum entry after forum entry, although the tasks that they developed for them actually sometimes did not really require a forum, okay, as a tool. But some teachers only used the forum because they didn't know any better, okay? So task design and the tool that you're using for them to do the task, that is very, very crucial, and it has to be very carefully thought out beforehand. Right, integration. Now, this is also a very important concept, and what it means is that what we have them do at home, let's say, should be addressed in the face-to-face situation, whether it is physical or online as well, okay? So we're not talking about two separate areas, so to speak, but actually there should be a connection between what they do at home and what you do in the face-to-face classes or in the video conferences. Now, to many of you, that might seem like an obvious point, but when you get started on blended learning and when you design your own course, then it's very easy to lose sight of that fact, that you have to establish that connection and that you have to make sure that you also give them a chance to, present what they have done, or to ask questions, or to reflect on what it is they have done, okay? I know this sounds a little bit abstract right now, but when you are in that situation, then you're working and you find all of these wonderful e-learning activities, and all of a sudden you're creating that bunch of e-learning activities for them at home, and you completely forget that you have to do something about them in your face-to-face classes as well. So that's a very important point to consider. Okay, and last, learner and teacher training. Yes, I think that's a very important point to consider as well. Not all our learners are computer geniuses. That is a myth, okay? I can still remember, when smartphones came up and all of that, word on the street was, oh, be careful because your learners actually know that device much, much better than you do. And, sometimes that is correct, but I give an example from my own teaching practice. When I once did an online lesson with 10-year-olds, okay, back in the day, then I said something like, okay, name that file and save it to your desktop. And they were completely lost. They had no clue what to do. What they could do very well was they could click on things and they could use Google, right? And they could download things. But as soon as it gets a little more complex than that, they also need training, okay? So don't automatically assume that your learners know how to handle the e-learning environment that you're presenting them with. They also need time, and maybe you also have to take the time to actually show them how to, navigate the whole thing. And the same, of course, is also true for teachers. I guess what I'm saying to you is we all have to be a little patient when it comes to these things. This is not the most natural situation for many. And so whenever you have some skills that you could share with your colleagues, or whenever you have some technological knowledge that you could share with colleagues, please do, because everybody will be grateful for your help. Okay, so that's the end of lesson 1, let's say. This is what I wanted to say about course design. Now, lesson 2, I think there is something like a blended learning toolkit, let's say, okay? I think there are a couple of things that everybody or every teacher has to think about or has to have in order to teach successfully in a blended learning or distance learning environment. And what you see here in front of you are basically 5 tools or 5 dimensions which you should think about and find solutions for yourselves. So the first thing that I would recommend when you do blended learning is that you do that in the context of a virtual learning environment. You will need a place where students can, save their data. You will need a place where they can, do the e-learning activities, where you set up the e-learning activities, where you store any resources. So virtual learning environments are key here. One of the most well-known virtual learning environments is Moodle. The advantage here is, of course, that it is free, so that schools can typically afford that. Microsoft Teams was also something that has gained popularity over the last couple of months here in Austria, and there are many others. There's also Edmodo, which is a free one, but there are also paid services like Blackboard and many, many others. Whatever it is that you choose, you will have to have a virtual learning environment so that you can set up your virtual class and that you have everything in one place. The second tool, which I would recommend, is that you have to think about some visualization and collaboration tools, because this is something that you will do on a daily basis when you're teaching online, especially in synchronous sessions. If you want to show them something, if you want them to actually gather some information, or if you want them to brainstorm, or if you want them to present their findings, from a group task, let's say. So you will always be in a situation where you want to visualize something and where you want to enable collaboration. And there are a couple of tools which I can get into at the end of my talk, which I would definitely recommend because they do a fantastic job as far as this is concerned. Right, the next tool that I would recommend would be, or the next tools, let's say, would be tools which allow you to provide input and to give your learners feedback. Now, the most basic way of providing visual input in an online environment is probably some sort of presenter software. Microsoft PowerPoint or Apple's Keynote could work here as well. Okay, so something that allows you to provide input. Prezi, of course, that also works. Then you will probably need some kind of screencasting software, because sometimes you will want to share your screen and you want to show them something, or you want to record your PowerPoint, or you want to record yourselves talking to them, okay? And there are some free solutions here. There are also paid solutions as usual, and we can also talk about that at the end. Right, number 4, and this is probably something that many of you will deem to be the most essential tool, so to speak. That is, we will need some apps to support skill development. Especially as language teachers, we want apps that actually help us to do our jobs quite naturally. And so you will have to think about, okay, what kinds of learning apps could I use in order to support listening development? What kinds of apps could I use in order to support speaking development, reading development, writing development, and so on. Again, we can get into some of this at the end. At this point, I would just like to mention that I have found that usually when you're using e-learning activities, they can cover a lot of ground depending on how you use them. So it's very easy to think about it like this. I want to support listening, so get me a listening e-learning activity. But in reality, it doesn't really work that way, because the e-learning activities that you're going to find can actually do more. And usually we are, faced with an integrated skills training situation. We can put our focus on some of these skills, obviously, but you will rarely find them in isolation when you do e-learning. Okay, and the last tool which I would recommend is that you think about how you're going to assess your learners and how are you going to give them summative feedback. And there are different ways of doing this. Now, that also depends on what kind of virtual learning environment that it is that you're using and what kinds of options that offers. So, for example, when you're using Moodle has a grading option, and that is a system that has its own regulations and its own things that you can do, other things that it cannot do. So this is something that you will have to figure out, beforehand. And maybe this is also something that will help you in the decision-making process, what kind of VLE to pick. E-portfolios is another great option to provide assessment. Video feedback is something which I'm using constantly. And the advantage of video feedback is that it feels much more personal. And students have reported back to me that they feel seen and that they feel heard. And in a video feedback, you can say so much more than you could ever possibly scribble on a piece of paper or a virtual document. So this is something that I can highly recommend. Okay, now lesson number 3. Stick to one platform. I know this might sound like an obvious thing again, but I can tell you what happened at the beginning of the Corona crisis here in Austria. All of a sudden, everybody had to do distance learning. There were many teachers who didn't have proper training how to do this. And the result was we had a plethora of different platforms that were used. Now you might say, okay, fair enough. What's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. The only problem is that it is extremely difficult for learners to keep track of what it is that they're doing. If you have a math teacher who uses, let's say, Facebook, if you have an English teacher who prefers Moodle, if you have a geography teacher who is on Microsoft Teams, then as a learner, or from a learner's perspective, you are on 20 different platforms, all of which work very differently, all of which, have different ways of doing one and the same thing. So that is very, very confusing and taxing. So my recommendation to you would be, or if you're working in a school, agree on one platform that everybody uses, okay? And I think there should be something like a process of professional evaluation of what is it that we need, and can the virtual learning environment actually provide all of these things. Right. So it started with many different platforms in Austria, and then after a couple of months, these were the ones that were used the most in my view. Moodle for one, and also Microsoft Teams. I think that probably also had to do with the fact that schools in Austria, get the Office 365 subscription, and Microsoft Teams is part of that. So it was a no-brainer to actually, use that. But these are the ones that I have encountered the most, and that have been reported back to me the most. Right. Here's the next lesson. Keep the workload manageable. Now, there's something very interesting that happened when this whole e-learning thing started. There were some teachers who felt the need to actually, bombard the learners with work. And it felt like some kind of overcompensation in a way, but you do not have to do more than you usually would do, right? So even if you are in an online environment, it's very tempting to say, okay, and they could do that as well, and they could do that as well. Oh, and let's just also throw that in for good measure. Just keep in mind that you are not the only one here, and the learners have to actually be able to manage. Okay, lesson 5, be present online. I think this is a very, very important and frequently underrated concept. When you're doing an online course, given the fact that you're not in the same room and that you don't see one another, on a daily basis necessarily, it's important that you show teacher presence. And now teacher presence can take many different forms. Teacher presence can mean that when you get an email request, that it doesn't take you forever to reply. I know of teachers who get loads and loads of emails from their students, and then they wait for a week and then they get back to them. But from a student's perspective, this is not ideal because you feel left in the lurch, more or less. So be present, reply to emails as soon as you can. When you're using a virtual learning environment and there's something like forum discussions, let's say, discuss with your learners. You are also a participant. So be part of that, play along, so to speak. That does a couple of wonderful things. First of all, it is a great tool to bond with your learners within the virtual learning environments. And they also have the feeling that you are watching and that you are there. If you don't do that, then virtual learning environments or e-learning activities can feel very isolated sometimes. So be present. This is something that you should definitely consider. Okay, lesson 6. Be aware of others. What do I mean by that? This has to do with the situation that many families are faced with. For example, here in Austria, we have many families who share one computer at home. So if it's a family and they have, let's say, 2 or 3 kids and all of them have to do e-learning activities, then that can be problematic because of screen time. Everybody needs the computer, and then we have fights over the computer and all of that.
It's 11 o'clock.
So what you should bear in mind here is even though you are teaching online, you can still give them offline tasks. Okay, this is not forbidden. You can say, okay, do this or that offline. And then we're going to talk about this in our next session. No problem. As usual, it's in the mix of things, right? But that's something that is just a very practical thing to consider. Okay, and this is my last lesson, lesson 7, know your apps. In my experience, many teachers that I talk to and many students that I talk to do not know their apps well enough. And so sometimes instead of figuring out whether an app can do something for them, they look for another app that does that one job. And that is not always necessary. So the better you know your app, the better you understand its functionality, the more you will be able to appreciate its potential, and that will inform your planning. And instead of having zillions of apps that you're using, you could also have maybe only 5 apps that you use on a regular basis. So this is something that I can only emphasize. Really, spend some time with the apps or the activities or the e-learning activities that you're choosing, and find out what they can do. Find out what the limitations are, because that will be much more advantageous for your learning situation than anything else. Okay, in closing, let me just refer you to a couple of useful resources. So if there are some people among you who have never done something like this before, or who feel a little, uncertain about how to get this off the ground, there are a couple of useful starting points which I could recommend. Here we have Graham Stanley's book called Language Learning with Technology. This is a great resource because it is a collection of, of ready-made lessons, which you can basically take and adapt for your own purposes. And he also recommends specific websites, specific apps, in order to do all of these lessons. So that's a very low threshold entry to the whole topic. If you would like to learn a little more about, the theory of blended learning and the kinds of additional skills that it brings to the table, then I would recommend the book called Technology Enhanced Language Learning, which gives you an overview of the most important issues that we are faced with. And if you are looking for something that my colleague Thomas Strasser, who wrote the last book called Mind the App 2.0, he always calls that quick and dirty apps. So if you're on the lookout for quick and dirty apps, quick solutions, then I can only recommend this book by Thomas Strasser, Mind the App. Very, very easy to read, ready-made things that you can use right away in your classroom. A great starting point, I would say. The last thing which you see here on the slide, and this might be a little too small for you to read, I'm not sure. I have also included 3 links here. The first link is related to Mind the App, the book, and it sends you to a page where you find many different kinds of videos in which you hear Thomas talk about the apps that he is introducing in the book, and he also shows you practical examples of how you could use that in your own language classroom. Another link that I would definitely recommend is Russell Stannard's teachertrainingvideos.com. I'm sure many of you have heard of Russell Stannard. He is a very, very prolific e-learning guru, let's say. And his site is full of wonderful resources, very short videos, which show you how you can implement blended learning or distance learning concepts in your own teaching. And the last link, which looks a little lengthy here, is a link to the Council of Europe. And the Council of Europe has provided a site, and with a vast collection of e-learning apps, websites, software applications, and the great thing about this site is it is searchable. So maybe I can show you in a moment how this works, but it's wonderful because you have all of these filters and you can actually find what you need very, very easily. Okay, so that's it for me. I hope you found this presentation useful, and I'm very happy to answer your questions right now in the next section. Thank you very much.
Video. Okay, Ron, I think a big thank you.
Thank you.
Not an easy activity to do, to present, and you cannot see us, but we can see you. I think on behalf of the PowerLanguage team and everybody watching today, it was great. Really enjoyed your presentation.
Sure, thank you.
Very informative. I like the combination between the theory and the practical information, and I know that's how you work, and we'll be working well on that together. So thank you for that. I think all of us will also have recognized some of the everyday realities in our teaching life, in our parent's life as well. You know, when my own children were bombarded with work, you know, on the one hand, and but with at some points they had nothing to do, and then they had tons of things to do. So there are many different situations that I think we recognize in Scotland, things which happened in Austria also happened here. Just to let you know, Ron, as well, we do use Teams in our schools here. It's free for schools in the UK, so we use Teams a lot. As you can see, there's a lot. Please use the chat, people, as you are doing now, to say thank you to Ron. Mille grazie, Ron, says Angela. Do we have any questions? Nadine, did you want to ask a couple of things to Ron before maybe I do? And I'm going to have a look at the Q&A as well. Would that be all right?
Okay, yeah. Well, Ron, I really enjoyed your presentation and how you structured it, helping us teachers, trainers, in thinking of how we need to structure the blended or distance learning and the differentiation between the two. So really my questions were on how we can encourage and help teachers in putting together all that progression, and what you said really emphasized the fact that we need to talk to each other at whole school level, or maybe whole local authority level, to make sure that we're using the same same tools. When you mentioned the fact that teachers have preferred platforms, and in fact that learners ended up having to use up to 20 platforms, that is a comment that we've heard, from learners and parents. So it's how we can maybe help schools or individual teachers collaborate with colleagues in order to decide on what the best platforms might be. And also, how would you go about helping learners become familiar with these tools? So let's say that we were in a situation again of closing down schools and having to work from home. How do we anticipate that in preparing learners, especially if we are talking about very young learners, and be able to use these tools at home independently?
Okay, so there were a couple of questions in there.
Yes, yeah, quite a few, sorry.
So let's talk about the choice of the learning platform. I think it's very difficult to say, which platform is the best platform. It really depends on what it is that you want from a platform. Personally, I would always choose platforms which give me the greatest amount of flexibility, because that way I can be sure that if I find something new, I can implement it into a platform. Excuse me. My personal choice is always Moodle. I have found Moodle to be a very, very flexible tool. And if you understand the system well enough, then you can basically make it look like a website, and it can do whatever you want it to do. Now, there might be some people who disagree with me, and they find Moodle a little clumsy because it's an open source application and all of that. I'm sure there are also paid versions out there which do a similar job, or maybe sometimes a better job. But over the years, I've always, and I've tried a couple of different things. I've always come back to Moodle because that has given me the greatest amount of flexibility. If you say you would only use a virtual learning environment for a limited amount of purposes, then maybe it doesn't have to be Moodle, because maybe Moodle is then too powerful even. So then maybe you want to choose something like Edmodo. Edmodo, for example, is a platform which is also free. It looks very much like Facebook, and it's based on this idea of, you're posting everything that you want to say to your learners. When there's a discussion, they would have discussions in in different kinds of threads, just like you know that from Facebook and so on and so forth. So it's very hard to say what is the best platform. If you're looking for a criterion, I would always go for practicality and flexibility. And what I mean by that is I need my platform to actually allow me to get other things into it. So if I'm using, let's say, Google Drive, then I want to be able to embed what I have in Google Drive in my platform. If I'm using a YouTube video, then my platform has to allow me to embed that and to do something with it. So these are the criteria that I would base my choices on, I would say.
Just to let you know, Ron, if I may interrupt here, in it's different situations, of course, all over the UK. In Scotland, there's something called Glow, which is an intranet. So it's the Scottish platform used by all schools around Scotland.
Right.
Most schools in Scotland, I should say. So it gives that flexibility of embedding other tools within it, including Teams.
Yeah, exactly. A colleague of mine, for example, he swears by Microsoft Teams. Personally, I have never used Teams in my teaching, but I have had a look at it. And the way Teams works is it takes away the burden of designing anything for your learners, I feel, because you have this very close-knit system and there are these things that you can do. It just looks the way it looks. And if you wanted to do something, then you install another app. Moodle is a little different because Moodle can look quite dull and you actually have to invest a little bit of time in order to make it look pretty, you know, especially when you think of young learners, for example. So Microsoft Teams takes away that burden from you. Again, you know, it's horses for courses, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, Nadine, what was the second part of the question? So
the second part of the question is helping young learners be prepared to use tools at home.
Yeah. Okay, so I think there are a couple of ways of doing this. I think we can do that systemically, and we can do that, you know, in a very low-key variant, so to speak. So when I say systemically, I mean, regardless of the corona situation, I think every school should actually do something about e-learning in one way or the other. You know, you can like it or not, but computers are here to stay. And, you know, they are just part of our life. And when you think about the amount of time that we spend on our phones and whatnot, it would be ridiculous to ignore that, you know, and to make believe that these things don't exist. At the same time, I'm not saying use them all the time. This is not the point, okay? But I think there is this space between where we can find a good balance between introducing or using the devices that they use in their everyday lives for teaching and learning purposes. I think the big advantage is that when you think of cell phones, for example, once you get them hooked on an e-learning app, you are on their phone and they carry that phone with them everywhere they go, you know, and it also allows them to basically practice and learn wherever they are. There is this notion of ubiquitous learning. And so, I mean, these are things that are very, very easy to put into practice. In terms of helping younger learners, I think it really has to do with the tools and the tasks that you're using. So when they're very young, I would probably try and use e-learning activities that are very visual, that allow them to interact, you know, in an almost haptic way. So I would probably go for a lot of dragging and dropping activities, maybe a little bit of filling in, but nothing too fancy. And then you can, you know, build it up from there, I guess. Yeah. Maybe just one quick anecdote here. When I taught a class of 10-year-olds, and I tried to use Moodle for the first time with them, that was a couple of years back, and I was not aware of this. The problem that they had was that their hands were too small for the keyboard.
Right.
And this was something that had never occurred to me, you know, because we're so used to, okay, everybody can do everything, blah, 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 blah. But they didn't really find their way around the keyboard. They didn't know where the keys were, but they could handle a mouse. So, you know, if you asked me to do something for young learners, then I would probably start with e-learning activities that involve heavy usage of the mouse, and then we build up the typing bit as we go along.
That's great. Thanks, Ron. Yeah, interesting, because I also agree, we never think, we always tend to assume that the learners, particularly younger learners, will know how to use the computer, will be geniuses, as you described it, you know, at ICT tools, but in fact they're not. And I was doing an online course here in Scotland for East Goyle, and a lot of the learners, S2, so age 14, were struggling with the technology side of things, and I hadn't anticipated that. I just assumed they knew how to use Teams, and you know, it was the content of my lesson rather than the technology side of things, which I had to focus on, but it wasn't. I was wrong. Some practical questions coming from our colleagues. There's plenty of reactions, Ron, so that's lovely. A very practical one is, are there any apps you would recommend to develop speaking skills? That's Laura, our colleague Laura from Falkirk. She works in the school.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's a really important one, because I think we can all see that it's not a problem to actually focus on reading and writing when we do e-learning, because this is basically, you know, the bread and butter of everything we do online. However, when it comes to speaking, how do we do that? What can we do? Well, there are a couple of options, and I can show you some. You know, I'm just going to share my screen with you again. Okay, so I'm here in an empty Moodle course, and as I said before, that can look a little dull if you don't do anything to it. So what could you do when you are in a Moodle course and you don't want anything else and you would like to practice speaking? Well, let me just set something up really quickly. Let's just add a forum to the Moodle course, okay? So just going to click on forum, and I'm going to call this forum, blah, blah, blah. Right, and now we are here in the forum. Now, when you add an entry to the forum, there is an option to actually record yourself, right? So you can set up this forum, but you can tell your learners, for example, do not write in this forum, but record yourselves. So when you have a look up here, you have a couple of options to do this. You can either, you know, record yourself, or you can just insert an audio message. So it works like this. You just simply click on start recording. Hello, 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 this is my audio message. Okay. And then it's basically attached to your forum entry and you can play it back. Hello, 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 this is my audio message. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. This is very low threshold because you don't need a webcam, no nothing. You can just record, you need a microphone, you know, granted, but this is something you could do. Instead, what you could also do is do the same with the webcam. Hello, I'm just talking to you right now through the webcam and this is my forum entry. And you attach it and it's in there. And when you post that to the forum, then this is what your entry looks like, okay? So you can actually have a spoken discussion asynchronously in a forum, right? And you have used nothing else but the functionality of Moodle. In my experience, many teachers don't use that, although you know, Moodle provides it. So that's a very easy way of doing it. Okay, now let's say you don't want to use Moodle, you want to use something else. This is Padlet, for example. I'm sure some of you know what Padlet is. It's basically this huge canvas, and when you double click somewhere on the canvas, then you can add something to it, okay? And I could say my statement, okay? And now, yes, you could write something here, but then again, when you click the three little dots and you have a look, you can also record your voice. And so you could have, for example, a wall full of spoken statements that people can react to, okay? Again, this is all asynchronous teaching and asynchronous learning, because the idea is that you would do that and people can do that on their own time. If you want to practice speaking synchronously, then I would definitely recommend something like Zoom, which we're using right now, or Zoom Meet, because there you have the opportunity to create different breakout rooms, and you can actually put people into groups and they can do speaking you know, live to one another, right? But I think there are just great ways of doing this offline, sorry, not offline, asynchronously, right? So Padlet is a great tool to do that as well. Maybe another great app, which, let me just find that for you up here. Another great app is Little Bird Tales. I'm not sure whether you have heard of that. Again, this is a website which I would definitely also recommend for very young learners or for primary teachers. And what you can do here is you can basically create your own little presentations. They call them tales, okay? So let me just show you how to do this. I create a tale, okay? And then it asks me, what do you want to do? And I can then simply draw something, or I can take a picture, maybe from a class trip, let's say, and I just upload the picture here. And then you simply click on record and you say something, and then this recording is attached to this picture. And this way you can create little stories in which people, basically retell what they have experienced, or they simply talk about their class trip. And there are also many public tales which you can look at, where you actually see, little kids do this. So it's very, very easy, to work with that. Okay, should I go on? I have maybe 2 more, which I could recommend when it comes to speaking.
Yeah, that'd be good. In a way, Ron, at the same time, you're answering some of the questions. Somebody was saying, if the learners don't want to show up face-to-face, how do you still keep them engaged, or how do you get them involved? Excuse me, in your lessons, for example. Right. And these things are very good for that, aren't they? That you can record yourself, just your voice or video, but you don't have to be there live.
Absolutely. Yeah. So maybe let me show you 2 more, which I think are really great. There is this site called VoiceThread, for example. Okay, and VoiceThread works like this. Maybe I can just set one up quickly. You add media. So in this case, I'm going to choose a webcam video. Okay, we're going to allow this. And then it starts. Hello, everyone. Could you just tell me what you think about healthy food? Okay, then I stop my recording, and it's being uploaded to the website. Okay, you can give that a title. Tell me about healthy food. Save it. And now here I am. Okay, and when you click on that, let me just, sorry, when you share that, just open up in a new tab. Yeah. When you share that, this is what the learners see, okay? They can click on Hello, everyone, could you just tell me what you think about healthy food? Right, and now they have a couple of options. Down here is a comment button. And when they click on that, I mean, they could also phone in, but nobody's going to use that. Mm-hmm. But they can reply to this by simply recording their voice, or by recording themselves, just like I did, or by writing, for example. And then what happens is, here on the side, I cannot show you that right now because we have to have some activity going. All of these things are going to be threaded, so to speak. So you will have my statement, then here's the next statement, here's the next statement, here's the next statement. All of this is always clickable and replyable, and you're creating this huge kind of, network of statements, of people replying to one another, or replying to what it is that what you want them to do, what the task was. So, and again, the great thing about this is this can be embedded in Moodle, for example. This can be exported as a link. You can share it on social media and so on and so forth. It also exists as an app, so you're also on their phones. So I'm a fan, right? Yeah.
Just interrupt there. You also, something I enjoyed in your presentation, you also mentioned teachers' presence. So just now we've had a look at if the learners don't want to be seen face-to-face, live, for example, or there are ways of them joining later on or in different ways. But it's the same with us teachers. When you showed the inbox with 6,500 emails, unanswered emails, I kind of understood where you were coming from. And I'm sure many colleagues watching this will have had and are still having the same experience. So that's another way of making your presence felt by the learners. You, teacher, they can see you, they can engage with you. But actually you're having a cup of coffee because you've been working hard anyway and you're taking 5 minutes off, but they can still see you at any time of the day. Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. I'm really big on this whole teacher presence thing. And the feedback that I got from my students was they always felt that I was with them in the room, so to speak, because they could see me and they could, and even if I wasn't, they would just see me and they heard me talk.
and they could actually see that I took the time to sit down and record a 5-minute video explaining them what to do. And that really works miracles. So this cannot be underestimated, really.
Yeah. Before you show, I think you have one last one. Did you say after this or not?
Yeah, there's one last one. Which
just before you do that, I want to say there's plenty of stuff happening in the chat and the Q&A, which is great. We won't be able to answer everything just now. Some of you are sharing some of your favorite apps and tools that you use online. Remember that this, as Elise reminded us, is will be recorded on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to watch it again with the chat and the questions. We'll share Ron's presentation as well on our website. You'll get an email, Ros, is that right, from us. And number 3, during the coffee break at 11 o'clock, I think, Ron, you said you'd be with us having a virtual coffee. So any other questions, maybe more informal, you'll be able to ask Ron directly. Ron,
absolutely. Absolutely. I'll also have a real coffee, actually.
Sorry?
I'll have a real coffee, actually.
You have 2 minutes left, Ron. Do you want to share maybe the last app?
Okay, 2 minutes left.
Yeah, 2-3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, I could, or maybe is there any other question that we could quickly answer that doesn't have to do with teaching speaking? Because I can see the Q&A as well. Should I just?
Yes, suggestions how to do blended learning when the technology isn't really working. I presume that's not an easy answer. That's not a short answer. Maybe that's a coffee break one.
And also dealing with the situation of some of the learners not having access. I mean, you mentioned that a bit, Ron, but not having easy access to technology and making sure, how do we make sure that they can still do something if they don't have regular access to a computer?
Yeah, so this is something that we have heard time and again as well. Sometimes there were pupils who just couldn't be reached, and they just sort of disappeared in this whole corona craziness. I will say this personally, I feel that we are in a time of transition. I think it will only be a couple more years and the situation will go away. It's very unlikely that people these days are not in some way connected to the internet. It's very rare, actually, at least in Austria, to find someone who isn't. This is not to say, of course, that this doesn't exist. If that is the case, though, then you will simply have to find ways around it. So one of the ways around it could be, but I mean, that depends on local policies, I guess, to keep schools open and to give them access to computers in the library, for example, if there is such a thing, right? Or you could also think about, doing some of the things you have your learners do online in an offline version as well. So, and if push comes to shove, you would simply have to pick up the receiver and give them a call, We've also done that with some learners. I don't really have a solution for that, I guess, but my feeling is that this is something that is definitely transitory, and in a couple of years down the road, we will probably not have this discussion any longer. Right now, we will just have to find individual solutions.
Very good. One of the colleagues wrote in the chat or the Q&A that she was worried about, technology failing, or the learners having problems, us teachers having problems. But she said, now, we've passed beyond this, and it's about working together. I really like that message, actually, working together towards success. All in this together. That's what you're saying, Ron, as well. In 2 years' time, maybe we'll be more comfortable. At the moment, we are developing our own skills, and together. And I think,
and there's always something that can go wrong. Can go wrong at all times. So
absolutely, and it doesn't mean it's not the end of the world. At one point, in fact, your mic went off slightly, and Roz and I looked at each other. We thought, oh no, technology is failing. But this is part of the learning process, and this this process that we're going through, all of us together.
Just like when you run out of ink.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, or the chalk on the old.
Chalk, there you go.
Am I showing my age now? Of course, Rose is only 30, so she doesn't remember chalk. 22 plus 10 years ago. Okay, so thank you very much, Ron. Great. Everybody, I know you're with us because I can read what you're saying there. So at 11 o'clock, Ron will still be with us and we'll be able to answer some of your questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to ask all the questions, but Ron, from the theory and also the practical point of view, from these 2 points of view, this was great. So thanks again.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you at 11 o'clock over it. Go and make yourself a cup of coffee now. Online learning, of course, PowerLanguage for the past 8 years, we have been developing online resources. Of course, when we started, we didn't think, COVID was not invented really, but 8 years ago, we started with the PowerLanguage for School platform that over 50% now of Scottish local authorities are using. I think we have, am I right in saying there's over 70 schools in Wales, which is great, using the PowerLanguage for School platform. I don't know if we have our colleagues from Cork University, but recently we've been developing resources for secondary schools in Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, where they promote online learning, and CLIL in particular. So we have been developing resources for them as well, CLIL and online. So PLS, PowerLanguage for Schools, now's the time for us to give you some updates linked to PowerLanguage for Schools, what we've been doing in times of COVID and what will be happening. We also have PowerLanguage courses. Remember, these are the online courses that we published maybe 4 years ago now, I think the first course, which was French for Families, and that was about 4 years ago. So again, we'll tell you what's been happening with these courses. I think Rose will share our screen in a minute so that you can see these websites. And some of the colleagues will talk about PLC, PowerLanguage courses, and PLS. So some of you who haven't been using these tools yet, maybe you'll be able to find out more through these examples of best practice. So I don't know if are you sharing the screen now?
Yes,
basically, the PLS, PowerLanguage for Schools, during lockdown, when lockdown started early April, development officers and teachers got in touch with us to say, what can you do for blended learning? And what we decided to do was to get teachers to email us, get in touch with us. Rose, that's it. Get in touch with us and ask us to open up, unlock, we call it, unlock some of the videos so that the learners at home could use that. For example, a teacher would say, could you unlock the video linked to water cycle? And just that little video. And using Teams, in fact, teacher would give tasks to the learners at home using these videos. Ron mentioned the flexibility. Well, the PLS was flexible enough to be able to do that combined with Teams. I think we had, 70 videos there in the end that we opened up, we unlocked. So that was a great success. Teachers got in touch with us, did get in touch with us, and the learners used that at home. Something else we did was called the PowerLanguage Challenge. I think Rose will share that. That's it. Yeah, sorry, that's the PowerLanguage Challenge. So again, it's about engaging with the learners and using their creativity, asking them to be creative. So we, as in Leo, who's still listening to us, we asked Leo to create this platform there, and we asked learners to share their podcasts in English and another language, their mother tongue. We had things I'll show you from different parts of the UK, France, and different languages. So for example, we have this little boy there presenting his family. So he was talking about something in your own local environment. We have this little boy talking about his family in Russian. We have Buster the dog. He's brilliant. Little boy, again, primary school boy, talking about his dog and the importance of his dog in English and in Spanish. Colleagues from the northeast of Scotland, we had this Lewis, this little boy again, talking in broad Scots. I think he added some Gaelic as well. So in Scots, we have 2 or 3 videos in Scots presenting of learners, pupils presenting their background. So this stopped over the summer. Schools and pupils stopped sending us videos, but I think it would be nice if you were to pass on this information to your learners again. I think it was a lovely community of learners created there. If you want to find out how to make Scottish shortbread, then maybe Rose's daughter might be able to
delighted to tell you.
help you there. Okay, so PLS, unlocking videos so that learners at home can access these videos. And the PowerLanguage Challenge, all the learners have to do is upload their little video. Ron mentioned that as well. Upload it. We upload it in at least 2 languages, maybe English and something else, or we have Scots and Gaelic in this case. And then we have a look at it and we publish it, make it available to everybody. Okay. Something else, I'm looking at my notes, we've been working on, and that's Nadine is going to tell us more about that. Rose, do you want to navigate for us?
Yes, so professional development resources, is that the one you want me to talk about now?
Professional development.
Okay, so you might already be familiar with some of the resources we had developed called language tips, which we had developed for French, German and Spanish, which covered basically tips on grammar and pronunciation. But we have recently developed a new type of resource in the form of videos and added resources. Currently we have 4 topics: so storytelling, songs, pupil interaction, and daily routines. And these videos are aimed at teachers, giving general pedagogical tips on how to present these topics in class. And then we have added a specific example lifted to one of our PLS resources in the form of a PDF underneath, which has embedded the actual resource and then added some teacher's notes. So maybe just to exemplify, we could open storytelling. Yeah. Rose, if you want to play the first minute of
Rose will do that. I just want to add that this side of the platform, so PowerLanguage.school, is open to everybody, by the way, whether you subscribe to the platform or not. It's within professional development. Teaching tips. Okay, so hold down again. And Rose, do you want to play this video? Here, I'll make it.
How to. Storytelling. Using stories is an exciting and creative way of learning and teaching languages. Stories can help introduce new words and structures, as well as cultural elements, and it can help you to recycle language in a new context. We use plenty of stories in our PowerLanguage resources, most of them for the final block in our lesson plans of a particular year. Some of our stories have been created or adapted by the PowerLanguage team in order to target the language that we want the learners to hear and use. Others, mostly in the responsive resources section, are original stories, slightly simplified. Stories support teachers to introduce various skills, such as listening, talking, reading, and writing to the learners. Our nativity story in PLS 1 Block 2 was adapted to encourage learners to listen and react to some words or sentences. Each time pupils hear certain words such as baby Jesus, stars, or donkey, they have to imitate and act out the word. One way to present what is potentially a complicated story to the class. The story of the little elephant from PLS 2.
Okay, so we could stop here, Rose. Thank you very much. So that gives you an idea of how we've presented it. Just as I said before, just giving general tips on how, in this case, to use storytelling and the different types of stories that you can find in PLS, whether it's in PLS and planners and associated resources, or within responsive resources, and we help you find where these resources might be. And then we've given a specific example. So within the PDF, we give you some additional ideas of activities and presentation for a story, which is Alban, le petit éléphant d'Afrique. Rose, maybe you want to open this one and we'll just play a few seconds of it so you see how we have organized the animation and presented the animation.
Okay. So this is available to everybody, Nadine?
Yes.
Le petit éléphant d'Afrique. Il était une fois, en Afrique, un petit éléphant.
Bonjour, petit éléphant. Comment tu t'appelles?
Okay, we'll stop here because
yes.
is saying to us that the quality isn't good. So we've, of course,
Yeah.
we got wrong in the sense that we forgot to select share screen with audio quality and video quality.
Okay.
We'll do that in a minute.
So if we close the video, but you'll see that underneath the embedded animation, we've given additional tips and ideas of activities, again, exemplifying what appears in the main video presenting storytelling.
So again, very practical, open to everybody, and can be used at home.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
So have a look at the website on a regular basis, because we have, as I mentioned, 4 topics at the moment, but we will add some at some points on different topics. And so the next item is responsive resources, unless you wanted to add something, Richard, on...
Yeah, something. Elise, can you, I know there are questions, I think, in chats. Because we're sharing our screen, we're struggling to read these things. So if you could maybe wrap up for us, or...
Yeah.
Well, maybe not now, maybe at the end of this, just as long as you're on top of it.
Yeah, I'm checking the chat on the Q&A.
Okay.
Somebody, yeah, okay. So share the screen, maybe share our screen, share computer sound, and optimize.
Yeah, so somebody liked the name Alban, which is the Welsh word for Scotland.
Is that, yes.
Fantastic.
And it rhymes with elephant, so it's even better.
Yeah.
Okay, can you carry on now?
Yes. Okay, so responsive resources, as I mentioned in our introduction, originally these resources have been developed at the request of individual teachers, schools, or local authorities on various topics. I have stopped counting how many we've got now, hundreds, covering all areas of the curriculum. So social studies, science and technologies, literacy, numeracy, so maths, etc. So huge amount of topics. And we're still getting requests for new, what we call dossiers, so sets of resources. So every set comes with extensive teacher's notes with ideas on how to use these resources, and especially how to include a cross-curricular element to these resources. We have included systematically animations as well as different types of activities which cover first and second level, so that if teachers want to focus on reading and writing at second level, they can. So in the new topics, we have recently developed a very big dossier on Mardi Gras, for instance, which you can use next year. So Gwen, if you're listening, I hope you enjoy it. And so that's for the whole school. So we have research activities, we're covering food, history, geography, so cities where Mardi Gras is famous. So lots of things which can be used for a whole day if you wanted to have a special Mardi Gras day. But we have recently also developed resources on lighthouses. We will have something on Remembrance Day very soon. So it's still happening. So check the website on a regular basis, but we also, the revamping process is still ongoing. So again, it's going back to all the dossiers we had developed. And as I mentioned, adding animations, more teachers' notes, more activities. So now I would say that if you're looking for resources, rather than typing age group, really select topics, because age groups still mention the age that the original request was for. So if a teacher said, well, I want a resource for 8 years old, we have mentioned 8 years old. But in the revamp process, we have added activities and bits of resources that would be suitable for younger or older learners, including secondary learners in some cases. So please go beyond just the age group and type topics that you're interested in to find, and hopefully you'll find suitable resources.
I'm sure you will, because as you said, Nadine, there are hundreds of resources.
Yes, hundreds, yes.
8 years worth of resource development,
yes.
almost on a daily basis. I think it's now over to you, Elise. Are you going to share your screen with us?
Yeah, okay, so a quick update from me. Share my screen, ha ha ha. Okay, so I'm just going to talk very quickly about two things that I've been working on recently. Oh, that's you. Sorry, Leo is not going to be happy with me. So we've decided in our blog, we used to have a responsive of the week that we would go out on a Friday or a Monday highlighting one of the responsive resources dossier that Nadine was talking about. Now we've decided this year that we would do it a little bit differently, and we are going to release responsive resource or responsive activity of the month. So we've called it Activity of the Month, and it's going to be one video that will unlock for everybody. So it will be available for everyone, even if you don't have an account with PL Schools. And so this video will be able to be watched for everybody, and will include some little activities that can be done using that particular video. And if you like it, if you have an account, then you know that there is further resources available on that same topic on the PowerLanguage Schools website. Okay, so that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight. Yeah.
So do follow our blog, because you'll get free resources there as well.
Yeah. follow-on blog, and that's also posted on social media once a month. Okay, and the other thing I have been working on recently is revamping in the same way that last year we revamped the whole of PLS1. We have done the same now with PLS2, so the second year of the PLS has been revamped, which means fresh images, graphics, fonts, and also on the request of users, we have included sound files on all our PowerPoints, and when possible we have also added extra videos so teachers can choose between watching the video or working from the PowerPoint if they wish to.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, these revamping activities that both you and Nadine have been working on really is linked to feedback from schools. I mean, some schools have been using the PowerLanguage for Schools for 8 years now, but also 8 years ago we didn't have the same technology as we do now. So you know, things evolve, obviously.
Yeah, so we're looking again at, you know, at the resources, at the links that we've included, making sure that they still work and they're still relevant. So looking at again at all that's available on the PLS planners and associated resources to make sure that they still look good after all these years.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Elise. We also want to share with you, we have 10 minutes left, and we want to share with you this, the PowerLanguage. So I mentioned we have PowerLanguage for Schools. We also have PowerLanguage Courses. That's PowerLanguage.courses. You'll see the URL is different from the PowerLanguage.school. And we started 4 or 5 years ago creating these online courses to be used in class or to be used at home. Now, during lockdown, we unlocked, you know the technical term now, we unlocked a course which was French for families and Spanish for families. This was our contribution to lockdown, trying to support the communities around the world. And we were amazed and delighted that we had thousands of hits from thousands of different devices around the world, as I said, of parents, carers doing the course for families online. We'll talk about this course later on. Our colleagues from Australia will talk about the course, and also Fia from Highland/Northern Alliance will talk about this course. But it's in a way just to show that there's real interest, and parents, carers are, I would say, really keen now to, they were always keen, I suppose, but maybe even more so now that they are much more aware of the responsibilities they have in their children's education, I would say. So that's PowerLanguage courses. Nadine, we have, the two of us, in fact, we've been working on PowerLanguage courses Spanish, level 2. Do you want to say a couple of things about that?
Okay, so yes, we have recently launched a level 2 of PowerLanguage Spanish for Schools. So these courses were developed to help, originally to help teachers in Scotland introduce L3 to their learners. And
additional language, that's what L3 means in Scotland.
Yeah, so third, sorry, so second additional language in primary school. So we had developed French level 1 and 2, Chinese level 1 and 2, and so we had Spanish level 1, and we were asked to develop Spanish level 2. So these courses include elements of language and culture, and they're really designed for the teacher to learn alongside their learners. And they have been very successful in getting learners to use their skills and transfer their skills from L1, L2 into L3. In fact, I mean, we've mentioned that I think at a conference before with Richard and I launching the Chinese courses in schools where learners had French as L2, and both Richard and I sometimes forgot what language we were using and were presenting in French rather than English. And with the learners really taking that on board, not phased at all, and really using French, English, really translanguaging, using French, English, and Chinese as we went along. And that was really, really a good example of how we are teaching skills as well as language and culture, and helping all these learners really transfer all their skills into another language. So all that to say that sorry, Richard.
Nadine, we taught Chinese or Mandarin, I should say, in French in a small Scottish rural school. And the learners were amazing, using of course, the course, the videos, and the learners were just amazing.
They were indeed. It was, yes, it was really so exciting. I'm not fluent in Chinese yet, but I'm on my way, I must say.
Mandarin challenged. Could we move on to now, Elise, because we're running out of time. Everybody's desperate for their coffee. So, Elise, you're going to talk very quickly about the transition project, because
yeah, can you see it on, can you show it on the screen, or do you want me to share my screen? But very briefly, we've also added a new course in PL courses, PowerLanguage courses, which is a French transition course. Do you want me to show it, Kesha, or can you see it?
Roz is getting there. If you just...
courses for schools, and within courses for schools, you have a French transition course, which has recently been added to the website, and this we'll talk about later on this morning with Jen Reed, with whom we have collaborated on this course. So she'll be talking to you about why and how this course came about, and I'll be presenting a bit more of the course at that point.
Absolutely. What's important there is this was designed for secondary pupils to go into primary schools. But Jen will tell us more about this. For the how-to videos, by the way, that Nadine presented, the storytelling and so on, we worked very closely with Thea Highland, it has to be said, very, very closely. So thank you, Thea, for that. Okay, just to finish off before coffee, do we stop sharing our screen now?
Yes, I'll put the meeting ID and passcode in the chat just now.
Okay.
So you can...
I can just say two things about training. That's my number one hat, although I don't do much.
Sorry.
It's okay. I was joking.
You need to move the whole laptop again, because your green screen.
I don't do much face-to-face training, but you know, but a lot of online stuff. Anyway, West Lothian, Zoe Gordon will talk to us about it, but West Lothian ran their own conference where they had 150 people, I think, but Zoe will tell us later. And so what we did for that is we pre-recorded the video, which was then used, and is still being used, I believe, but Zoe will confirm, by West Lothian colleagues in their own time. Some of them saw it live, and some of them decided to use it later on. The last bit of information linked to training, East Renfrewshire have asked us to prepare a whole dossier. Nadine has mentioned the dossiers. This one is children's rights, because on the 20th of November 2020, it's International Day of Children's Rights. So we are preparing a dossier linked to children's rights, and we will live with teachers, but also recorded. We will record the session. Nadine and I will present this dossier and the different ways of using it in class and blended learning. So that's a new way for us to do training, not face-to-face anymore, but of course online, but using a practical dossier as a starting point and showing teachers how to use this dossier. So again, get in touch with us if you want to find out more about the training. Okay, Roz.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. What did you write then?
So we've put in the Zoom meeting ID and passcode.
You've only shared it with
No,
I don't think you've. Oh no, you have shared it too. Sorry about that.
It's every day's a school day for me right now too. So yes, so you can go on to Zoom.
Yeah.
And
if you leave this webinar now, you can, if you want to go to your kitchen, have a cup of coffee, you can leave it on and come back. This is going to be it's still on now, and come back maybe just before 11:30.
So that's important. We'll leave the webinar open, and if people just want to come back in half an hour.
If you decide to join us in the virtual coffee, then you leave the webinar, go to Zoom and use these details that Rose has just written down in the chat, but also she's emailed you these details, I'm sure. And we'll see you in 5 minutes. And this is when you can ask questions or say bonjour, hola to all the participants. All the participants wanted to join into the virtual coffee. The virtual coffee will finish at 11:25 again. And after that, if you go back to the webinar, click on the link that you had this morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so we'll just switch our cameras off just now, and we'll see you in half an hour.
See you.
Thank you.
I'll see you shortly.
Thank you.
Sur ma route, oui, il y a eu du move, oui, de l'aventure dans le movie, une vie de route. Sur ma route, oui, je ne compte plus les soucis, de quoi devenir fou, oui, une vie de route. Sur ma route, oui, il y a eu du move, oui, de l'aventure dans le movie, une vie de route. Sur ma route, oui, je ne compte plus les soucis, de quoi devenir fou, oui, une vie de route. Sur ma route, j'ai eu des moments de doute, je marchais sans savoir vers où j'étais têtu, rien à foutre. Sur ma route, j'avais pas de bagages en soute, et dans ma poche pas un sou, juste la famille entre nous. Sur ma route, il y a eu un tas de bouchons. La vérité, j'ai souvent trébuché. Est-ce que tu sais que quand tu touches le fond, il y a peu de gens chez qui tu peux te réfugier? Tu peux compter que sur tes chers parents, parce que les amis, eux, disparaissent un par un. Oui, il m'arrive d'avoir le front au sol, parce que Dieu est grand, et on est seul, on meurt seul. Sur ma route, oui, il y a eu du move, oui, de l'aventure dans le movie, une vie de route. Sur ma route, oui, je ne compte plus les soucis, de quoi devenir fou, oui, une vie de route. Sur ma fait des coups en douce, l'impression que mon cœur en souffre, mais je suis sous anesthésie. Sur mon chemin, j'ai croisé pas mal d'anciens, ils me parlaient du lendemain et que tout allait si vite. Ne me parle pas de nostalgie, parce que je t'avoue que mon cœur est trop fragile. Je suis comme un pirate naufragé, oui mon équipage est plus qu'endommagé. Je sèche mes larmes, je baisse les armes, je veux même plus savoir pourquoi ils me testent les autres. S'il y a plus rien à prendre, je sais qu'il me reste une chose, et ma route elle est trop longue, pas le temps de faire une pause. Sur ma route, oui, il y a eu du move, oui, de l'aventure dans le movie, une vie de route. Sur ma route, oui, je ne compte plus les soucis, de quoi devenir fou, oui, une vie de route. Sur ma fierté pour avouer. Les sentiments, il faut pas jouer. Les sentiments, ils te font douter. Arrête de dire qu'ils te dégoûtent. Ah, ma copine, raisonne-toi, arrête tes sottises, tes soutises pour parler d'amour, pas besoin de sous-titres. Je te vois, tu soupires, laisse-le partir, je suis là au pire. Bah ouais, quand cœur est brisé, toutes les femmes te disent c'est l'homme le fautif. Je l'aime à la folie, un peu, beaucoup, passionnément, pas du tout, pas du tout. Je l'aime à la folie, un peu, beaucoup, passionnément, pas du tout, pas du tout. French kiss. Je l'aime à la folie, French kiss. Je l'aime un peu beaucoup, French kiss. Je l'aime passionnément, French kiss. Pas du tout. Tu t'es fait complètement envoûter. Regarde maintenant ce que ça t'a coûté. Y a certaines choses qu'il faut pas goûter. Arrête de dire qu'elle te dégoûte. Ah mon gars va, tes frérots sont là, t'inquiète pas ça va. Comment ça, oublie là, tu peux tout recommencer. Une de perdue, 10 de retrouver. Toi tu veux retrouver celle que t'as perdue. Bah ouais, quand cœur est brisé, tous les hommes ne font que dramatiser. Je l'aime à la folie, un peu, beaucoup, passionnément, pas du tout, pas du tout. Je l'aime à la folie, un peu, beaucoup, passionnément, pas du tout, pas du tout. French kiss. Je l'aime à la folie, French kiss. Je l'aime un peu, beaucoup, French kiss. Je l'aime passionnément, French kiss. Pas du tout. Tu n'es jamais sûr de toi, tu sais pas ce que tu veux toi. Tu le veux sous le même toit, tu la veux sous le même toit. En amour suffit pas d'y croire, tu vis dans le doute et l'espoir. Quand t'es seul face à ton miroir, tu te refais l'histoire. Mais tu l'aimes, tu l'aimes, tu l'aimes. Ah tu l'aimes, tu l'aimes, tu l'aimes. Je l'aime à la folie, un peu, beaucoup, passionnément, pas du tout, pas du tout. Je l'aime à la folie, un peu, beaucoup, passionnément, pas du tout, pas du tout. French kiss. Je l'aime à la folie, French kiss. Je l'aime un peu, beaucoup, French kiss. Je l'aime passionnément, French kiss. Pas du tout. French kiss. French kiss. French kiss. French kiss. French kiss. Yeah. Hello. You. Ce son est une dédicace à Madame Pavoshko. Vous vous souvenez? Monsieur Diallo. Aïe Madame Pavoshko, non, je suis pas en prison ou à l'hosto. Non, je fais des hits Madame Pavoshko. Et vos gosses me kiffent Madame Pavoshko. Oui, 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 oui Madame Pavoshko. J'ai toujours autant d'inspi Madame Pavoshko. C'est pour mes gars so weed Madame Pavoshko. Si vous voulez on se tweet Madame Pavoshko. Et ça fait solo, tête sous l'eau. Je me suis dit c'est le moment mais le fire. Fire, fire, fire. Solo, tête sous l'eau. Je me suis dit c'est le moment mais le fire. Vous vous souvenez de Wham, le petit Renoir qui grattait des couplets de barge. Fuck le délégué, dites-moi où est le mic. On dirait quand ma pouca wesh do M-Snipe. Ma vie, les cours, oui, 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 je m'en bats. Les oui, je sais, c'est dommage. Du coup, vos surveillants sont contre moi. Moi. Ah, allez, Madame Pavoshko, non, je suis pas en prison ou à l'hosto. Non, je fais des hits, Madame Pavoshko. Et vos gosses me kiffent, Madame Pavoshko. Oui, 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 Madame Pavoshko. J'ai toujours autant d'inspi, Madame Pavoshko. C'est pour mes gars so weed, Madame Pavoshko. Si vous voulez, on se tweet, Madame Pavoshko. Solo, tête sous l'eau, je me suis dit c'est le moment, mais le fire. Fire, fire, fire. Solo, tête sous l'eau, je me suis dit c'est le moment, fait d'aller-retour au rectorat. Vos discours dans ma tête et j'en ai fait une vraie chorale. Toi tes épaules dans ton bureau tu me dis va bricoler. Et moi au lieu de te gifler je préfère en rigoler. Dès que nos regards se croisent, hop, adrénaline. Oui je sais j'ai pas calculé le prof de mathématiques. J'ai analysé un de ces fameux couplets Ouna qui cliquait. Oui je sais madame le rap a failli gâter ma vie. Allez madame Pavoshko, non, je suis pas en prison ou à l'hosto. Non je fais des hits madame Pavoshko. Et vos gosses me kiffent madame Pavoshko. Oui, 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 oui madame Pavoshko. J'ai toujours autant d'inspi madame Pavoshko. C'est pour mes gars so weed madame Pavoshko. Si vous voulez on se tweet madame Pavoshko. Je me suis juré qu'un jour vous danserez sur mes sons. À une époque je voulais me procurer un Smith et Wesson. Une petite voix me chuchotait. Vas-y tire sur les codes. Ça fera une petite anecdote. La directrice elle est conne. Pourquoi ce compte de surveillant me demande de vider mes poches? On est pas au poste de police et moi je suis fidèle au poste. Mettez-moi vos heures de colle. Même allez prévenir vos collègues. Vous avez qu'à être en colère. C'est nous les restats du collège. Oui aujourd'hui ils diront que je ne rappe que pour les types, que pour le fric. Quel drôle de type. Je dirais même petit con qui s'imagine avoir la force de King Kong. Oui, aujourd'hui ils diront que je ne rappe que pour les types, que pour le fric. Quel drôle de type, je dirais même petit con qui s'imagine avoir la force de King Kong. Enfin bref, allez madame Pavoshko, non, je suis pas en prison ou à l'hosto. Non, je fais des hits madame Pavoshko. Et vos gosses me kiffent madame Pavoshko. Oui, 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 oui madame Pavoshko. J'ai toujours autant d'inspi madame Pavoshko. C'est pour mes gars so weed madame Pavoshko. Si vous voulez on se tweet madame Pavoshko. Solo, tête solo, je me suis dit c'est le moment, mais le fire. Fire, fire, fire. Solo, tête solo, je me suis dit c'est le moment, mais le fire. Fire, fire, fire. Si au conseil de classe, les profs disaient que tu faisais partie des plus nasses l'école. Jette ton cahier, mais le fire. Fire, fire, fire. Et c'est pour toi un avertissement. N'attends aucune excuse en plus de divertissement. Jette ton cahier, mais le fire. D'arriver en retard pour me faire envoyer. Oui madame, oui je fumais des dans les toilettes. Oui j'étais présent qu'à la cantine. Oui j'ai pas eu mon bac. Oui j'ai pas eu mon BEP. Oui j'ai pas eu mon brevet. Oui, mais je vous remercie. Vous m'avez donné la force de réaliser l'un de mes rêves les plus fous. Ah, les yeux plus gros que le monde. Ah, à suivre.
Alors qui dit études dit travail, qui dit taf te dit les thunes, qui dit argent dit dépenses, qui dit crédit dit créance, qui dit dette te dit huissier, lui dit assis dans la merde, qui dit amour dit les gosses, dit toujours et dit divorce, qui dit proche te dit deuil car les problèmes ne viennent pas seuls, qui dit crise te dit monde, dit famine dit tiers-monde, et qui dit fatigue dit réveil, encore sur de la veille, alors on sort pour oublier tous les problèmes, alors on danse, 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 alors on danse. Et là tu dis que c'est fini car pire que ça ce serait la mort. Quand tu crois enfin que tu t'en sors, quand y en a plus, eh ben y en a encore. Est-ce la zik ou les problèmes ou bien la musique, ça te prend les tripes, ça te prend la tête, et puis tu pries pour que ça s'arrête. Mais c'est ton corps, c'est pas le ciel, alors tu te bouges plus les oreilles, et là tu cries encore plus fort, mais ça persiste, alors on chante. Alors on chante. Alors on chante. Alors on chante. Et puis seulement quand c'est fini, alors on danse. Alors on danse. Alors on danse. encore. Et ben y'en a encore. Et ben y'en a encore.
Me fui a echarte de menos. Me fui pa' volver de nuevo. Me fui pa' estar sola. Me fui porque estaba tan cerca, casi tan cerca, que no puedo ver lo que tengo cerca de mis ojos. Tus manos que ya no son manos, y pienso en vano que un día vuelvan a darme la vida. Me estoy echando a correr los ojos de otro muchacho que al menos cuando me mira me hace reírme un rato, porque los tuyos están tan lejos de mí que casi no puedo mirarlo. Y mientras, ¿dónde estabas cuando te llamaba? ¿Dónde estabas cuando te llamaba? ¿Dónde estabas cuando mi voz se hacía tan pequeña que no salía y se ahogaba en una habitación o dentro de mí? ¿Dónde estabas cuando dormías a mi lado y yo no podía dormir? ¿Dónde estabas cuando te escuchaba palabras que no creías ni tú? Entre tanta mierda, dime, ¿dónde estabas tú? ¿Dónde estabas cuando te llamaba? 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 Por eso me fui, pa' echarte de menos. Me fui a volver de nuevo. Me fui pa' estar sola. Me fui, por eso me fui, pa' echarte de menos. Me fui pa' volver de nuevo. Me fui pa' estar sola. Me fui. ¿Dónde estabas cuando te llamaba? 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 Por eso me fui, pa' echarte de menos. Me fui, pa' volver de nuevo. Por eso me fui, pa' estar sola. Me fui pa' volver a hacerlo de nuevo otra vez. Apareciste una noche fría, con olor a tabaco sucio y a ginebra. El miedo ya me recorría mientras cruzaba los deditos tras la puerta. Tu carita de niño guapo se la ha ido comiendo el tiempo por tus venas. Y tu inseguridad machita se refleja cada día en mis lagrimitas. Una vez más no, por favor, que estoy cansada y no puedo con el corazón. Una vez más no, mi amor, por favor, no grites que los niños duermen. Una vez más no, por favor, que estoy cansada y no puedo con el corazón. Una vez más no, mi amor, por favor, no grites que los niños duermen. Voy a volverme como el fuego, voy a quemar tu puño de acero y del morado de mis mejillas saldrá el valor pa' cobrarme las heridas. Malo, malo, malo eres, no se daña quien se quiere, no. Tonto, tonto, tonto eres, no te pienses mejor que las mujeres. Malo, malo, malo eres, no se daña quien se quiere, no. Tonto, tonto, tonto eres, no te pienses mejor que las mujeres. El día es gris cuando tú estás y el sol vuelve a salir cuando te vas. Y la penita de mi corazón yo me la tengo que tragar con el fogón. Mi carita de niña linda se ha ido envejeciendo en el silencio. Cada vez que me dices puta se hace tu cerebro más pequeño. Una vez más no, por favor, que estoy cansada y no puedo con el corazón. Una vez más no, mi amor, por favor, no grites que los niños duermen. Una vez más no, por favor, que estoy cansada y no puedo con el corazón. Una vez más no, mi amor, por favor, no grites que los niños duermen. Voy a volverme como el fuego, voy a quemar tu puño de acero y del morado de mis mejillas saldrá el valor pa' cobrarme las heridas. Malo, malo, malo eres, no se daña quien se quiere, no. Tonto, tonto, tonto eres, no te pienses mejor que las mujeres. Malo, malo, malo eres, no se daña quien se quiere, no. Tonto, tonto, tonto eres, no te pienses mejor que las mujeres. Voy a volverme como el fuego, voy a quemar tu puño de acero y del morado de mis mejillas saldrá el valor pa' cobrarme las heridas. Malo, malo, malo eres, no se daña quien se quiere, no. Tonto, tonto, tonto eres, no te pienses mejor que las mujeres. Malo, malo, malo eres, no se daña quien se quiere, no. Tonto, tonto, tonto eres, no te pienses mejor que las mujeres. Malo, malo, malo eres, porque quieres. Malo, malo, malo eres, no me chilles, que me duele. Eres débil y eres malo y no te pienses mejor que yo ni que nadie. Y ahora yo me fumo un cigarrito y te echo el humo en el corazoncito, porque malo, malo, malo eres tú. Malo, malo, malo eres sí. Malo, malo, malo eres siempre. Malo, malo, malo eres. Ella se ha cansado de tirar la toalla, se va quitando poco a poco de la araña. No ha dormido esta noche, pero no está cansada. No miró ningún espejo, pero se siente todo guapa hoy. Ella se ha puesto color en las pestañas, hoy le gusta su sonrisa. No se siente una extraña, hoy sueña lo que quiere, sin preocuparse por nada. Hoy es una mujer que se da cuenta de su alma. Hoy vas a descubrir que el mundo es solo para ti, que nadie puede hacerte daño, nadie puede hacerte daño. Hoy vas a comprender que el miedo se puede romper con un solo portazo. Hoy vas a hacer reír porque tus ojos han cansado de ser llanto, de ser llanto. Hoy vas a conseguir reírte hasta de ti, ver que lo has logrado. Hoy vas a ser la mujer que te dé la gana de ser. Hoy te vas a querer como nadie te ha sabido querer. Hoy vas a mirar para adelante, que para atrás ya te dolió
una mujer valiente, una mujer sonriente, mira cómo pasa. Hoy nació la mujer perfecta que esperaban, ha roto sin pudores las reglas marcadas, hoy ha calzado tacones para hacer sonar sus pasos, hoy sabe que su vida nunca más será un fracaso. Hoy vas a descubrir que el mundo es solo para ti, que nadie puede hacerte daño, nadie puede hacerte daño. Hoy vas a conquistar el cielo sin mirar lo alto que queda del suelo. Hoy vas a ser feliz aunque el invierno sea frío y sea largo, y sea largo. Hoy vas a conseguir reírte hasta de ti y ver que lo has logrado. Hoy vas a descubrir que el mundo es solo para ti, que nadie puede hacerte daño, nadie puede hacerte daño. Hoy vas a comprender que el miedo se puede romper con un solo portazo. Hoy vas a hacer reír porque tus ojos han cansado de ser llanto, de ser llanto. Hoy vas a conseguir reírte hasta de ti y ver que lo has logrado.
Ya hace 2 meses que no quieres verme. Cierro los ojos y te siento enfrente. Unos talegos te cambian la suerte. No me sorprende el cambio del presente, ni los avisos que me da la muerte. Yo sin tu beso soy un indigente, y aunque tú quieras nada es para siempre. Y siento decirte que yo quemo la noche como hizo Nerón. Hago la pena de mi corazón, y aunque tus besos fueran religión, era un teatro, solo una ilusión. Quemo la noche como hizo Nerón. Hago la pena de mi corazón, y aunque tus besos fueran religión, todo era ficción, solo una ilusión. Luces en un decorado, frases de un guión. Todo era ficción, solo una ilusión. Luces en un decorado y frases de un guión. Todo era ficción.
Me llama todo el mundo menos tú. Todos quieren algo de mí menos tú. Es como si me hubieran apagado la luz. Provocan de mí una luz enterrada viva con mi corazón. Ir sin tu corazón pa' siempre, siempre, siempre. Voy a quererte siempre, decía siempre. Y cuanto más me lo decías, más lejos de mí te ibas pa' siempre. Te llamo pero no contesta. A veces preguntas sin querer respuesta, porque al responderte de nuevo no contesta. Te llamo pero no contesta. A veces preguntas sin querer respuesta, porque al responderte de nuevo no contesta.
Todo era ficción, solo una ilusión. Luces en un decorado, frases de un guión. Todo era ficción, solo una ilusión. Luces en un decorado y frases de un guión. Y aunque no quede nada, que todo se acaba, ni el alba, ni el rastro de la madrugada, ni el frío de la espada, la cama empapada, el volcán de tu almohada, alma decapitada. El culpable soy yo, que no pide perdón. Y en la vida improviso y me salgo del cuadro y te cambio el guión. Pa' ver mi fin no hay que ser vidente. Ojo de gata y una piel de serpiente. No digas nada que esta mierda se siente. Es como el agua que se ve transparente. Mi alma rota en una lata. He asustado al chamán y al psiquiatra. El veterinario me ha mandado al pediatra. Y esa loca me ha dado de alta.
Hello everyone again. I have lost my colleagues for the moment, but I'm hoping that they're going to rejoin us very soon. And we are going to promote Thea as our next speaker, Thea Palu, who's Development Officer for Gaelic and 1+2 languages in Highland Council. Thea will join us in a moment, and also I think she'll be joined by her colleague Rory Mackay towards the end of her presentation. Okay, so Thea is going to share with us the work that they've done, that Highland has done, Highland Council, in setting up a digital hub to help teachers in COVID times. So that's going to be the main focus of her presentation this morning, if we can get her on, hopefully very soon. So as you can see, she's got her camera. Here we go. Here you are, Thea.
Do apologise.
That's okay, don't worry. Right, so we've got you on, and when you're ready, just you can start your presentation. Yeah.
I can't share screen while the other participant is sharing, it says.
Oh, I am not sharing my screen, so it's not me.
Okay, that's fine. I'll start talking, and then
if you can start talking, because do I need to? Because I could maybe present your.
Okay, because you've got the PowerPoint otherwise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my name's Thea Palu. I'm 1+2 Development Officer from Highland, and Rory Mackay, my colleague, we work together. So I'm going to present to start with, and then at the end, he will join us and answer any questions. I'll try again to share. Okay, now I can share. Okay, so can you see my screen now? Can you see my screen? I can't hear anybody. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Were you able to see my screen then? Oh, it's all gone quiet. Can't hear anybody. Right. We can hear you too. Okay, fine. We'll try sharing again in that case. Sorry about that. I can't hear anybody else for some bizarre reason. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about the Highland Council Digital Learning Hub. And this was set up to support schools through school closures back in March. Let's just move you there. I just wanted to give you a bit of background. First of all, the whole aim of it really was obviously to support teachers and parents through lockdown, but we also took a more global perspective, thinking about how we could support parents with supporting their children at home, and how we could encourage them to help their children learn a language. So these are some of the questions that we had in our mind when we was designing the 1+2 languages sections of the Highland Council Digital Hub. And it just might be useful to think about this if you are doing anything like this yourselves. So what we looked at is how we could create a parental engagement package. Communication was the first thing we wanted to focus on, improving that communication between school and home, getting parents more engaged in the learning process. What support could we offer them directly? How could we help teachers with setting homework, and for future school closures? So that was the thinking behind it. What is it? It's a website, which I'm going to show you. And we're predominantly focusing on primary level, focusing on French and Gaelic as L2, but it could be used for L3. And we are using the main teaching resources that are taught that are used for teaching at school. So for French, that's the PowerLanguage Schools website, and also now the PowerLanguage French for Families course, which all schools in Highland through the Northern Alliance now have access to. And for Gaelic, it was the Go Gaelic course. So everything is matched to the learning in those courses. Everything can be downloaded or printed for anybody that wants to. And there are two key sections which I'll show you. One is key documentation, and the other is a topic-based approach to learning. There are two ways it can be accessed. Firstly, directly through the Digital Learning Hub website. And all of these hyperlinks here on the website, on this PowerPoint, you could access yourselves directly, and this will be shared with you. Staff might want to access the resources themselves, and everything that's on the Digital Hub for Languages is in a Google Drive that's shared that everyone can then access. We're working hard on the topic-based vocabulary sections to support those. So early is done for French, and we're looking at doing the first and second level. We're looking at creating some termly homework grids to match home and school learning for teachers to set homework more easily. Some themed projects for interdisciplinary learning that could be used if pupils, for instance, are off school for a day or short-term absences, and resources for the key areas of the curriculum which schools are focusing on right now: literacy, numeracy, and health and wellbeing. And then also looking at non-screen activities. The rest of this PowerPoint just has screenshots in case we can't access the Digital Hub directly, but I'm going to try and do that now. So you could look at that. It'll be a reminder for you. So the Digital Hub, this is the homepage. Just going to go through it. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. So we scroll down past the literacy, numeracy, and health and wellbeing. And down here, we can see the curricular areas, mainly accessible through the levels, but also can be accessed directly through 1+2 languages. This website is accessible to everybody, not just people in Highland Council. So if we scroll down, primary, French, and Gaelic, we can scroll down to early level, first or second. I'm going to focus on early level. Each one is set up in the same way, and the resources are the same for each. In early level at the top, we have access to the newsletters that can be downloaded for staff and parents, one a term. Down here, we have the Let's Learn Together for French or activity guides for Gaelic. And this is the topic-based section. And below we have key documents. And at the bottom, we have access to the courses that are either used at school, such as the Go Gaelic, or the PowerLanguage French for Families course, so that parents can access it directly. So if we just look at some of these documents, what we tried to do was to share the learning that's going on at school with parents so that they can see what's going on. Because the key thing is that they know what is being taught, they know what the expectations are, and they know where they can go to get support themselves. So each one of these tabs links to a document. So these are sort of the top tips, generic advice here of how they can support their learners at home, with hyperlinks to the key resources, such as the French for Families course, and some other websites that are useful. And they could all be downloaded or printed by parents or staff. The overview, this is obviously done by levels, so early, first and second. So early for us is P1. This goes through the key topics that are taught. It summarizes some activities that could be done with non-screen activities. And there are hyperlinks in case parents want to go onto a website to see an example or listen to something, for instance. So here are the topics, activities that could be tried. Here are some games. These could be done at school by a teacher or done at home through homework activities. And here are the basic expectations at this level. So this is done for early, first and second level. So if we go into a lockdown again ever, or if and there's absences from school, this document can be looked at, and parents can find things that are relevant and useful. The games is a very simple one-page document that summarizes the instructions for the games that were previously mentioned, and the games are different at early first and second level for there to be progression. And try to think of games that could be played at home with a parent or a sibling, and games maybe that children already know and can do in their own language first. The vocabulary document shows all the vocabulary that would be taught at school, starting with individual words, but also phrases. These might be things that children just listen to or say, and then later read and write. And it's really as a support for the parents so they know what's being taught. Again, it's all matched to the PowerLanguage Schools course that our schools all use. The I can statement provides a simple overview of the learning journey, if you like, can be used as a monitoring and tracking document by staff, but also by parents. And there is a series of bubbles. For instance, it says greet someone with bonjour and say goodbye using au revoir. So parents don't have to look anywhere else for any other resources. And that could be traffic lighted by children to show if they can do it green, if they're not so sure, amber, if they really can't do it, red. And it'll give parents and the children themselves an idea of where their learning's at. Ron earlier talked about Padlet, so we collected websites together that were useful and that we've mentioned in the previous documentation and put them into a Padlet for early, first and second level. Some of them are the same, but also different ones for the older children. Also group them together into different categories so parents could decide where they were, what they were needing directly. So those are the key sections there. If we look up at the top, the Let's Learn Together, this section really is a topic-based section. So the previous section was key documentation to share the expectation so that parents know what's being taught at school and eases communication. This section really is to support them helping their child to learn a language, and they can learn alongside their language. The topics are, as a reminder of the topics at the start here of the page, and below there's a section for each topic. Each topic area has some videos or MP3 files as appropriate. The first is to introduce the vocabulary. The second tab is to show what activities could be done with that vocabulary. And the third is a Word or PDF file which summarizes the activities in the previous video. These videos are all short, they're no more than 5 minutes long. I created them using Screencastify. So there's lots of videos of me being silly and using different voices and different facial expressions to show parents what they could do.
Today I'm going to teach you how to say hello and goodbye. So hello is bonjour, bonjour, bonjour.
So using different voices. And here in the greetings activities, lots of different ideas for what could be done at home. Again, to give parents a chance to consolidate learning if they wish and try out different activities.
Bonjour. Today I'm going to look at different activities that you can do with greetings such as bonjour, hello, and au revoir, goodbye. Au revoir. Simple things that you can do are to play the game Echo. And for Echo, you're going to...
I've tried to use the same games that were previously mentioned in the documentation and exemplify this. And obviously these could all be used by staff as well, and they're all accessible through the shared Google Drive. And the last tab here, suggested activities, summarizes those activities. And again, this could be used by staff or by parents. And there are hyperlinks in some of the cases to different websites. to show where they could access further resources. And teachers, for instance, could use these ideas in homework learning grids, or also in grids for blended learning if there's ever another school closure situation or children are absent from school for a period of time. Okay, so that's early is done for French, but as I said, first and second we're working on still, and Rory's worked hard, so the Gaelic is more complete. If I scroll down now to the end of the PowerPoint here, just show you where, if we were to look at the parent engagement package on the Google Drive, then you'll be able to see where all the resources are. And this is what sits behind the website. So we really spent a lot of time thinking about what resources we wanted to create, and then what was a good interface for parents to access. And Rory put this all together. So you can see here the Google Drive. So you've got the French, for instance, and you would then click on your level, early level, and then you would see the mind map here, which has all the documentation. Everything's hyperlinked from that. Or early level supporting documents, access to all those documents sitting behind those tabs. And the Let's Learn Together, the topic-based section, all the videos and worksheets are in there from that section. And the homework grids is something that we're developing at the moment. Okay, I think that's everything. I'm afraid there isn't much time that I've left for questions.
Thank you very much, Thea. That's great. That's a huge amount of work there. That's incredible. If you have any questions for Thea, just put them in the Q&A section just now, and I'll pick them up. But yeah, that looks incredible, and a lot of effort put into that. How was the process? How did you find the process?
Well, it took a long time, I think. It helped that I'm a parent with very young children still, and a development officer and a languages teacher. So I was able to see it from several different perspectives, and really think about what might be supportive, particularly for parents. And I think even for staff, having an overview of it all very simply is helpful for them. And it just really demands knowing your teaching resource really well, knowing PowerLanguage Schools course or the Go Gaelic course incredibly well, to then be able to take out the key points and simplify it and put it in a way that is accessible for parents, because it's quite different working with parents as opposed to working with staff. And things need to be presented, I think, in a different way.
That's great. Well, there's a lot of congratulations on the chat, and also in the Q&A, and that was something that I was thinking as I was listening, is what feedback have you had so far from parents on the website, on the hub?
So parents that I've spoken to have just said, wow, this is just, amazing. We know what's going on. So many parents stop me in the playground and say, what words are my children learning in French? Because I want to help them, I don't know. And so they've said that it's just a great resource. And what they particularly like is how organized it is. It's not just a mass of websites randomly that the parents then need to spend ages, looking through. So hopefully it's something that it will survive through lockdown and be there for parental engagement at a longer point.
Okay, and there was another question. Did you have, from Stephanie, did you have help to set this up, or were you already so skilled technology-wise?
With me, Rory Mackay is not, that you can't see him, but my colleague is all things ICT, basically. So I come up with the ideas, and when Rory puts it all together.
Okay, so it's a double act then.
Double act. But Highland Council had set up the Highland Council Digital Hub first. So that came out first in light of lockdown. And then within that, we then had a section. So our development officer for ICT put it together, and then we worked with them to create something that we felt was going to be useful.
Okay, well, that's great. Brilliant. Sorry, Anisha, I'll let you back in.
No, that's great. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Elise? Yes,
Yes.
that's very good. So as you can see, Roz and I are now using a new computer because my computer, I had a problem with my computer, which is why we don't have the virtual background anymore.
We're back to basics, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What's
So,
important,
yeah,
as we're all learning.
I was just going to say if there's any further questions for Thea, we can you can still put them on the Q&A, but we're going to move on.
Virtual lunch, because we have to move on. We have friends from Australia have been waiting now to be presenting to us. Just to say, Nadine is lost somewhere in Brittany. I don't know if she has problems with the connection, but she will join again, but she's not with us just now. So Leo, could you promote Kate as a panelist for us, please? And I'm delighted to be introducing Kate. Nadine was going to do this, but because she's lost her connection, she can't do that. But Kate, I know you've been working closely with Nadine. I know you work all over Western Australia, which is a huge part of the world. I was lucky enough to go there and work in Perth a few years ago. Kate, your presentation will be in 2 bits. I think you will talk about what you do, then you'll share a video from one of your colleagues from a small school in the south part of Western Australia. And then you'll talk about what you do again for the second part of your presentation. Is that right, Kate? Are you with us now?
That's correct. Yes. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you very much, Richard, and Roz, and Elise, and Nadine, wherever she is. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Power Languages. I think you just do the most amazing job at the resources you produce, and the way that you support schools is just incredible. And just in the last sort of half an hour, I've just seen how you've pivoted to this homeschooling so effectively. Also, thank you very much for generously unlocking some of those dossiers, the files in the early stages of COVID. I know some of our teachers were just desperate for resources. Really, really generous of you. And also thank you very much for the invitation to I'm really here just to introduce one of our teachers, but I'll also just give you just a little bit of the context in Australia, just for, I suppose, a bit of an interlude, so that participants can reflect on what's similar, what's different in our two countries. I'm a languages consultant for the Association of Independent Schools of Western Australia. That's the biggest state in Australia. And I really consult for our independent schools, which are very, very diverse. And what was I going to say? Yes, so I'm going to just start with the context of COVID. We have actually, in Western Australia, we have been so lucky. We had about 1 week of panic before our school holidays in term 1, where schools went online and they went to online learning. We had 2 weeks of school holidays to get our head around it. And then we had a maximum of 2 weeks of online learning, and then schools basically went back face to face. We've only had about 650 cases of COVID in Western Australia, and they're mostly from people coming from overseas. We haven't had community spread for over 150 days. We are so incredibly lucky, but we're also very mindful that things could change any minute, that there could be an outbreak. So it's really interesting to hear how you're handling it and your own experiences. One thing that we do really share in common with all the Anglo countries is that there's often a real monolingual mindset around decisions made around languages. And one of the biggest challenges is just to convince people of the benefits of language learning. But there have been some fantastic things that have happened just in the last couple of years. First of all, for the last 80 years, we've now got an Australian curriculum, a national curriculum, and we've got specific curricula for 14 different languages. Languages like French, German, Spanish, Indonesian, Chinese, Japanese, but also some background languages, heritage languages like Hindi and Arabic, Vietnamese. And we've also got frameworks for Aboriginal languages. There are 150 in Australia. And we also have a specific curricula for Auslan, Australian Sign Language. And that's one of the things that I have noticed. I mean, although we are in a monolingual, there's often that monolingual mindset. The reality is that we're an incredibly multilingual country. And I've just really noticed over the last couple of years, there's been a really growing interest in Aboriginal languages. So the minority languages of Aboriginal languages, as well as Auslan, because we've had bushfires and we've had COVID, and now Australian signers are just ubiquitous on our screens. And so I think that's been really influential. Kids have been asking about, you know, they've been really thinking deeply about what is a language, what is communication, what is a code. We also have a policy in Western Australia that mandates languages from years 3 to year 8, which will eventually be finalised by 2023. One of the challenges in my role is just simply supporting language teachers. A lot of them work in isolation, and I don't just mean physical isolation. They're usually the only language teacher in the school. They are basically it. So I'm always trying to find ways to support them. And one of our teachers, Alicia McIntosh, she will be featured in a short video in a minute. She is a French teacher at Margaret River Independent School, and she was already using PowerLanguage resources. And then I heard about the PowerLanguage French parent course when I came to Scotland 2 years ago, and I thought it would be a really great initiative for her particular context. So ASWA, we provided some funding to cover the course for her to be able to implement it, and she gave it a go. So I'd like to thank her first of all for trialing the course, and also thank her for just her preparation for today to provide you with a summary of how it all went. While the video is playing, please don't hesitate to just put, if you have any questions, just in the chat box, and I can answer them at the end of the video. So I don't know who's going to press play.
Yeah, it's okay. Our colleague Leo is doing it just now.
Fantastic.
Good morning. I wish to acknowledge the Warden people as the original custodians of this land that I'm speaking to you from today. Thank you, Kate, for your continued support and for introducing me in real time. I very much wish to present live, but I'm currently traveling to Perth and just could not guarantee my network connection. To the team at PowerLanguage, thank you for piloting your program here in WA and for inviting me to speak of my experiences at your conference, particularly to Nadzin, who not only mentored and informed my teaching, but inspired such positive change at my school. My name is Alicia McIntosh, and no, you are not mistaken, I do not have an Aussie accent. I'm a Canadian expat currently living in Western Australia. I work as the French language specialist at the Margaret River Independent School in the southwest of the state. For perspective, if you Google the most isolated city in the world, you will land on Perth. I live 3 hours south of there in Margaret River. It's a tourist destination that boasts amazing wineries, rural agricultural land, biodynamic forest, and world-class surf. It is both rugged and beautiful in as much as it is remote. Our school is nestled in its own little spot of bushland and fosters a strong connection to country. It was started in 1982 by 10 families who sought to provide an opportunity to integrate home and school learning in a caring, supportive environment. That connection and community still exists today and is one of the reasons we felt that PowerLanguage for Families would be such a good fit here. Parents are expected to provide community hours, and educational development contributes to that. We initially launched PowerLanguage for families in 2019. The program was met with much enthusiasm and support from the school community and staff. Remember our remote context. We had about 109 students at the time in primary, and the program was offered for year 3 through 6. About 19 families enrolled, a further 2 adding on later on. The general feedback was very, very positive, even from families who didn't enroll. They were just happy that a program was being offered at the school. The program allowed parents to actively participate in their child's second language learning. Parents now excitedly greet me in the shops in French in town, as well as around school. And for the staff, it allowed them to embrace the language program at the school. And in such, I've observed an increase in French language usage, particularly between the transitions of homeroom to French class. There's just an overall vibe at the school, one that sings, French is here. It's part of the framework. It's part of the culture of our school. A big factor is that when something becomes valued, particularly by parents, the connection between what's happening in the classroom and what's happening at home is bridged. And I've noted that when that is lacking, there's no bigger obstacle to learning. At least that's been my experience in my 15 years teaching. If a family doesn't value or see the relevance of second language learning, it's really hard to engage authentic learning, the kind that goes beyond the classroom and beyond the superficial and really goes deep and reflects the bigger picture. Throughout my years teaching, I have often heard it said, why are we learning a second language? It doesn't even matter. I'm never going to France. I'm never doing this. But nothing could be further from the truth, because language is a skill. It is central to identity. It is central to culture, and it is central to the way we learn. It is the medium in which we process and understand the world around us. And to learn a new language or multiple languages is to understand the world better and thus ourselves better. And that was the biggest takeaway from the pilot program. Parental engagement fostered that connection, that critical connection that could really change and did change the attitudes of creating a positive environment for French language learning or second language learning at my school. The goal in my classroom is always to foster a love of language and an understanding of others, and using a holistic approach to create that. Parental engagement is key to that success. I know that to be true because it has been my experience. My parents positively approached bilingualism and being exposed to different languages, and as such it has opened every door for me. The lens upon which I see the world changes with the languages I know. And in a world fraught with such lack of understanding and acceptance of each other, where better to start than in these tiny, meaningful connections. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration. Wherever you are in the world today, stay safe.
Wow, Leo, I think you can stop the video. This is amazing, Kate, and I know Alicia would have liked to join us. This is, incredibly inspiring in many ways, and I'm sure a lot of people around here would love to go and work in Margaret River Primary School. It was really inspiring.
It looks very cold in the video. It's not always that cold, but we have got winter at the moment, so or autumn.
Yeah.
So, I was actually, that's the second time I've heard the video, and I was thinking that's actually a really good video just to share amongst teachers, to share amongst parents at school. Alicia's really highlighted that, there are some really important points about why we learn a second language. So.
Yeah, no, I'm sure many of us will use this as well as the starting point of a training session, with teachers, with pupils as well. I think it's lovely. It's very good. We're getting some nice little messages as well for you and for Alicia coming up on the chat box. Anything else people would like to ask just now to Kate? And Kate, have you got anything else you'd like to share with us meanwhile?
what I'll do is I'll stay around for about another half an hour, but I'll also just put in the chat site. Like I said, we only had maximum 4 weeks of online learning. We were in lockdown for a very short period of time, but we found that the parental engagement, that it was very small, but parents who were engaging and who were really taking the time to get their children to learn a second language right across the board, that the whole online experience was just, that was the silver lining. That there were these connections made between the parents and the teachers that would never have happened if we hadn't had COVID. However, on the whole, the majority of parents were very reluctant to, with home learning, to even engage with language learning. So that always remains our biggest challenge. And so it's so wonderful to hear that down at Margaret River, the expectations have always been really high. They have always said we would love to have a French day where people are speaking French. Well, when you only have French once a week, that's really difficult to do. So this parent PowerLanguage's French parent course really gave it impetus, which is just so important. The other thing that I'll do is I'll just put a link to a website of all the ICTs that commonly came up, because we collected a lot of information from teachers. What were some useful ICTs that helped during the online learning phase? And I came up with there's about 21 that just kept coming up all the time. So I'm sure you already know them because you've had a lot more exposure to it than us. But I'll put that link in as well. So
yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Kate. This is great.
Very nice comments. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. A big thank you from everybody here, I'm sure. And everybody is saying, the parental engagement key for all of us as well. We were in lockdown for 3 months in the UK anyway. And so parental engagement was a big part of it. And hopefully the PowerLanguage course for families helped parents structure this home learning with their children. Okay, thanks again, Kate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to Elise, and I think Leo, meanwhile, will promote Jen as a panelist.
Yeah,
Elise,
so I'm going to introduce Jen Reid, who's a development officer for Angus Council. And as I said at the beginning of the conference, we worked together on the new French transition course that has been added to PowerLanguage courses. So Jen is going to share with us her presentation about how the project came about, and then after that I can show some of the resources on the website itself. Hello, Jen.
Hi everyone. So pleased to be here today, although again in my study and not somewhere exciting with croissants and human company, but it's a good start. So Elise, have you got my PowerPoint? Can you use it from there?
So you want me to share it as opposed to you sharing it yourself?
Yeah, I think so. It's probably better. Read technology at this end. The old IT is not brilliant.
Okay. Bear with me. Right, so I need to go at the start. That would help. Right. Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry, because that's the version with the sound, which I prepared. so I'll just stop sharing for 2 seconds, and I'll find the version without the sound. That would help.
Marvelous.
Jen, do you want to give a bit of background to this project, Jen? Meanwhile, Elise will look for the other presentation.
Yes, we'll do. Just to explain the presentation IT side of things, we were a bit worried about the connection today, so we prepared 2 videos, one with audio and one without, and Elise is just finding that for you now. So my name's Jen Reid, and I'm the 1+2 staff tutor at Angus Council, and as such we're part of the Pantayside team alongside Perth and Kinross and Dundee. So we put together a project really a suggestion to PowerLanguage on following quite a lot of deep looking into various surveys, etc., that I'll explain a little bit more about in a minute. And we've come up with the idea of a transition project. And by transition, I mean the period from primary 7 into S1. And we came across some, looking at various surveys, etc., we found out that this was a particular area of need. So we'll go into that now. Now we've got our slides up so we can make a start. So I've done my introduction, so we can move on to the next bit. Marvelous. So what happened was, as all of you, I'm sure, working in authorities, you have the regular Education Scotland survey that we have to ask our schools to complete, and that's primary and secondary. And we also have a series of sort of internal surveys that we do, but just to keep us in touch with schools and check that what we're doing is what they actually need to see and to be using. And this, following several surveys and informal meetings and language meetings, more formal meetings with staff, we came across 2 or 3 areas that we felt really needed looking at, and this was reflected in our aims for the following year. So our primary staff, in particular primary 7s, teachers were saying that although they were very au fait with the standards, the E's and O's, and what they actually should be doing within that sort of final stage of level 2, they really needed some nitty-gritty detail into what they should be actually teaching. So that would be in terms of phrases, what languages, they knew the skills they should be looking at, but what particular areas would be helpful for secondary teachers. So we have a really strong, capable bunch of primary 7 teachers. They just needed a little bit more support and so a really good focus on what was actually needed to support our primary 7s moving into S1. Now this coincided with a request from secondary staff, and again this came up through the surveys and informal meetings. They were saying, so yeah, this is great what you're sending up. We're seeing an improvement in skills and languages and application and sort of attitude to language learning. What we'd really like primary 7 pupils to focus on, or to have the skills and knowledge of, is these particular areas. And this matched nicely with the primary 7 teachers saying, what do we need to do? And the secondary staff were saying, well, actually, here's what we'd like you to do. And this started a little germ of an idea together as a staff tutor team. Additionally to this, because my colleague is another staff tutor within Angus, she's a secondary teacher. She had requests from a range of pupils from S5 and above. They wanted more opportunities to actually practice their language and to also get a little bit more in terms of volunteering experience. And obviously a primary school is an ideal place for this. Now, this was done, I have to say, before COVID. So you can't, unfortunately, with many schools, you can maybe have 1 visitor a day. So that's not going to include a group of S5 pupils coming down to work in the school. But we can, Elise has carefully worked around that, and a lot of the work on the course that you're going to see in a minute allows people to work a bit more independently and maybe not rely on the secondary pupils coming in to give a bit of language support. So they're the 3 main areas that popped up, and we thought, well, can we combine these, the primary needs of the primary 7 teachers, secondary S1 teachers, and secondary pupils who can share their knowledge and love of languages with teachers who maybe need a little bit of a boost. So can we put the 3 together? So we had a little head scratching session and we came up with the following. So can we whiz on to the next slide, Elise? Thank you. So we came up with a sort of rationale. This is before we spoke to the PowerLanguage team, so we thought we'd better get clear in our heads before we asked them to help us with this, what seemed like a huge task at the beginning. To put things into these 4 very simple areas, obviously it's not quite this simple, but first of all, most importantly, the project would work alongside the L2 statements that you have right at the end of primary 7 and the PowerLanguage planning, which our staff are used to using. So we don't want to be changing too much, and everything we do in this sort of proposed transition course should link into the L2 statements and the PowerLanguage planning. We wanted an area in the course where the secondary pupils following the requests could come in and practice their language skills, build on the volunteering hours, and I'll speak about that a little bit in a minute. And we thought maybe they could, depending on the ability of the pupil, they could speak to the whole class, they could work with groups. And again, this is going to depend a little bit on the character of the secondary pupil. We needed to really pin down exactly what secondary colleagues wanted for this smooth transition. What actual language skills, well, we know the skills, but it's more in terms of the knowledge. What knowledge do they want primary pupils from primary 7 to come into that start of S1? Because what we had seen, and I'm sure you've all seen this, is there's quite a range within the cohorts coming up into S1. Now, obviously, that's going to change every year for a myriad of different reasons, but we wanted to kind of reduce that and compact it a little bit. So S1 teachers had a little bit more of an idea of what they would need to be preparing for that start, the first term in S1. We wanted it to be just 6 to 8 sessions that would be ideal in the last term, that fantastic summer term before everybody moves on. We wanted it to really be a refresher course, it to be online so it can be adaptable. All the resources need to be there. And basically it's a package we can hand over to our primary 7 pupils, teachers, and say, off you go. So we had these 4 statements kind of clarified for us, and that's when the hard work for Elise and her team came in, because we then took this to them and smiled very nicely and said, would you mind creating this course? So we wanted very much to have all the PowerLanguage resources and pictures and formats that were already there, so staff didn't have a new format to be working with. And well, we just smiled and kind of dropped the package and ran, and Elise and her team have been working very hard since then to create this fantastic course. So it just gone to the final slide. Thank you, Elise. So that's a very sort of whistle-stop tour of the reasoning behind, the rationale behind this course. And Elise is going to explain this a little bit more in detail in a second. But basically, what's been created is a fully resourced online course that's accessible for primary staff. And it allows the primary 7 in that last term to sort of summarize what they've done, to get it fresh in their memories, and through a range of activities, particularly carousel activities, ready for S1. It supports transition, so you're looking at language learning and building. And of course, if you've actually got secondary pupils in the building and speaking to pupils, which we can't do at the moment, but we will be able to in the future, then it's going to sort of take away that fear of transition for S1s, the new S1s. And this is a little bit I haven't spoken much about so far, but we're very, very pleased with this aspect of the course, because for our secondary pupils in particular now, they're looking to build up their CVs. It's very important that we support them in their movement into the world of work. And one of the ways we can do that in school is to get them some recognition for their volunteering experience. So we can provide an experience where they can go in and be supported and build up their volunteering hours. And secondary teachers amongst you will know that your DYW representative in the school will be able to point you towards the SQA volunteering award. And it's a process that you need to look into within the school itself, but basically the pupils sort of log up their hours of volunteering. Or if you prefer a less sort of formal approach, there's the Saltar award, and they can, that's more independent, so they build it up themselves, and then they can work through a sort of selection of medals that they can put into their CV. So we're supporting their development in terms of their own curriculum. And an additional extra, which has popped out of this, is that, of course, any secondary pupil coming into a primary class on a volunteer basis, if you put that down in your CV because you want to go into education, that's going to look very positive for you. And PowerLanguage have provided a section in the course that supports kind of like there's some basic teaching skills for the secondary pupils. So we're not just expecting them to go into a classroom and teach. Everything that's been created for the course has an explanation for the pupil to go in and be a sort of mini teacher for the day, or the 7-week session, however long you want to do it for. And they're given top tips, and they have a little course to work through. And again, they can put this on the CV, and it gives them, well, you wouldn't expect them to just go in and stand in front of a class of hungry primary 7 pupils and be able to do, for example, classroom management. That's a skill that you need support with. And again, it's going to depend on the teacher working with them, but we would encourage teachers to take on a sort of mentoring role for our pupils as they come into schools. And I think that is going to help everybody all around. So we're very, very pleased with that aspect of the course. So real whistle-stop tour, and I'm sure you'll be looking forward to hearing from Elise, and she'll give you a little bit more of what's actually happening in the course. So
yes,
if there's any questions at the end.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much. So I've stopped sharing your presentation, but I'll share my screen now in a second. Just bear with me, and I'll just give you a very, short whistle tour of the course just now. Here we go. So this is the French for Schools transition course on the PowerLanguage Courses website. And as Jen said, it's a one-stop shop for secondary pupils and also primary practitioners if they for the transition into secondary school. So we've provided lots and lots of resources to support the practitioners and to support the secondary pupils with delivering the course. And we've created 4 lessons, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and again, we worked with Jen and the rest of the DOs in identifying the key language that we wanted to cover during these 4 lessons. They can be stretched, so they can be done over 4 weeks or 6 or 8. There's enough material there to do that. So depending on how much time you have to deliver the course. Okay, and the idea is that we cover and we reinforce lots of the core language that is expected of the pupils in secondary school, and also that we cover all 4 skills. I think that was an important element for us. We wanted to try and cover all 4 skills. So as I said, for each lesson, there's a lot of supporting material. So I don't know if you saw that on the previous screen, we had an overview of the course. So there's a course overview. And then for each lesson, there's the teacher's notes, which are very detailed. And as you said, Jen gives plenty of tips for how to conduct the class, how to deliver a session. So for the secondary pupils, that's very helpful. And then they also have key language with sound files that helps them, if they're not so confident about their pronunciation, or if they want to check their pronunciation before they go into the primary classroom, then they can do that with a key language and with sound files. And there's a key language in a printable format for the tutors and also for the pupils that's been added here, and also some instructions cards for the games, for the activities. So these are all the support documents. And then in terms of how the course is structured, we've started each course with a wee intro and then a video that presents the vocabulary for the class. So here you can see the introducing yourself video, and we have recycled some of the videos that we use elsewhere in PowerLanguage. Okay, and then as you said, Jen, after the initial introduction presentation of the key language, then there's a carousel. I can never say that word in English, sorry, of 2 activities. So dividing the class in 2 groups and getting them to practice their language during an activity. So here you've got in lesson 1, a dialogue practice where they have to reorder sentence cards and then practice the dialogue orally. And then there's a famous People Kim's game, which they have to set up and play and memorize key phrases, key sentences. Okay, and then at the end, there's a homework sheet that can be given to reinforce the vocabulary for each lesson. Okay, so that's a quick tour of the website.
That was amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you very, Elise. Thank you very much.
And also
Jen.
thank you to Nadine. Nadine and I worked quite closely on that project. So Nadine is finally back with us.
Thank you, Nadine.
So we worked together on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad to say Nadine is back with us, by the way. Anybody got any questions? Has anybody got any questions or comments for Jen and Elise and the team? I think it's a very exciting project, involving pupils into the primary school. Wonderful. Okay, it's 12:29 now in terms of timekeeping management.
We're doing well. We're doing well. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Presentation. Bye.
It's now time 12:30 to promote Zoe Gordon as a panelist. She'll be our last speaker today, and then we'll wrap up. The team, the PL team, will wrap up. But I'm delighted to have Zoe Gordon joining us just now. And Zoe Gordon is a development officer for West Lothian Council, and the West Lothian and the whole team the whole 1+2 team managed to organize a conference at the start of the year. I think it was a week ago now. Incredible. And I think, Zoe, you had 150 participants live, but you're also watching this conference. So, Zoe, do you want to tell us a bit more about this?
Sure. Hi, everyone. And firstly, thank you very much to Richard and Roz, Elise, Nadine, everybody at PowerLanguage for inviting me along. As Richard said, I'm Zoe Gordon. I'm the 1+2 Development Officer in West Lothian. Normally, I'm a primary school teacher, and this year we're quite lucky that I'm doing this post full-time. Language is one of my passions, so for me to do a job like this full-time is very, very exciting. What I want to share with you today is a project that we had to work on. Normally we do our conference in West Lothian in May, and it's always in person, and we invite along guests to help us share different sessions. So we will always have Education Scotland coming along and telling us the national picture, and then we will use other companies that we work with. So we've used Le Français en Écosse before, we've used PowerLanguage, we've used SILT, we use lots of different companies. This year, obviously in May, we couldn't go ahead. So we had to think differently. We knew we wanted to move the conference, so we moved it from May, and we said, let's try it in September. But we also knew September was going to be very unlikely to have a large gathering together. So what we decided to do was create an online conference, which was very exciting for us, but also very daunting. And there were a lot of things I had to take into account. So I'm going to share my screen now and tell you a little bit about the process I went through, in the hope that this could be useful for some people if you're thinking of doing something similar. So let's have a little look, and hopefully this will work. Okay. Okay, so organising a conference in times of COVID. I never thought I would be doing a presentation titled this, but here we go. So what steps did I have to go through? So firstly, I had to think about the organisation. So who were we going to use to present? what content, the timings, and the platform. And that's really important. And I've had some feedback since the conference that said, you know, that obviously organisation, whether your conference is in person or online, is key. So I think if you nail that, and if you get that where it needs to be, as we've seen from today's conference as well, if you have everything all lined up, you practice everything, you do as much as you can, then hopefully it can be very, very successful. Timings. So we needed to make sure that the timings were accurate. So I did some breaks between my sessions, the same as we've done today with that little coffee break. I think that's really important to allow people to time just to take a little pause, to go get a coffee, comfort break, etc., and be realistic about how long things would take. I mean, I think certainly for me, sometimes, you know, you think something's going to take maybe 10 minutes, but it can take longer. So just be prepared for that. In terms of IT, so we needed to think about what platform and how to test it. Now, because we were based in school, I knew we really had to try and use within our internal Glow profile within Teams, but I knew there were restrictions to that as well in terms of getting people externally to be able to be part of our conference. So that was something I had to look at. And the promotion and communication. So before, during and after, what did I need to do to tell people about it? So make sure they knew it was coming and make sure that they knew where to go, where to access it all. And then afterwards, just to make sure that they still know where the resources are and that they can give me some feedback. So they were key things that we worked on. And also the feedback. So post-event, what went well, what can we improve upon? Because we might do this again. And, you know, I think we learn from every opportunity how to do it differently. So one of the first things I did was I created a conference to-do list, and this is just an example of it. So it was all the different things that I needed to work on from my own personal point of view, so I could tick them off. I love a to-do list. I love to have everything where it needs to be, and for me that just made me make sure I didn't forget anything. So I had things like you know, the promotional side of it, but I also had things like having to practice an online you know, intro with the people that were participating to know how would it look, how could they share their screen. Exactly what we did. You know, I did the same thing with Richard last week to make sure that for today I knew what to do. I also created this flyer. So this was just something I wanted, promotional materials. I think, you know, certainly we get so many emails, and I was really aware that being back at school after, you know, being locked down for so long, people were really in a different environment. People were not necessarily wanting to hear from me. They had been told to really focus on health and well-being, literacy and numeracy, and languages are kind of in the background a little bit. I needed to gently get my information out there, but make it eye-catching. So I did a few different things. I did a promotional video, and I did this little flyer just to kind of make it visual. And I put that out on an email group to lead learners. I sent it out to head teachers so that they could share it further, and I had it on Teams pages. I created my agenda as well, which is sent out, and this was how we would present the conference. So as you can see, we had a welcome where myself and our education officer and our network leader for secondary welcomed the group. So our team that came along was mainly primary language lead learners and also secondary language teachers. But we also invited wider management team and wider teachers, because this wasn't the same as our normal face-to-face conference. This meant more people could access it. So we really wanted everyone to see it. So we introduced the session. Then we had Education Scotland. They did 2 sessions for us. We had Louise Glenn telling us the live national update, and then Shona Hugh did a session for us on progression in language learning, where she was sharing some new resources, which was really important for everyone to see. Then we had a live practical session on Lingoscope to navigate the resource. And then we went on to what we call our online workshops. This, I feel, was the most successful part of our conference. And this is the bit that I've got and I can use again and I can promote. And I'm going to show you in a little bit how this worked. But basically what we did was we only had so much of it live because we have limited time, but we had so many things we wanted to share. And normally in our conference, people would break up and go to different sessions, so they would see something different. So everyone would have a slightly different experience. In this way, we had 19 pre-recorded sessions, which meant that people could see all of them if they wanted at their own time. and when it suited them. That's what I think makes this unique, this conference and the way we did it. And I definitely would use this format again, because it did mean, as I say, it was tailored to you, but you could access it when you wanted, and you didn't feel that you missed a session because you had to choose between 2 back-to-back sessions, which can happen in real life when you go to these conferences. So we had a link to our SharePoint, which I'll show you shortly, of all these workshops, and they're on there for them we said for the next couple of weeks, but I'm actually thinking of just keeping them on there for longer. This was a catalogue. This is just a sample of it. I made this so that they would know what the workshop was, so that before the event, they could research and decide what they wanted to look at, or after, or during, up to them. You can see that they had the name of the workshop, then there was a primary, secondary, or both, so what was it suitable for, the presenter, and then a little blurb. So the blurb was just to give them a feel for what would this take me through, what would I find out about in this workshop. And I think this was an important part of it as well. The way I decided what to do was just to think, if I was attending, what would I want to know and what would I need to know? And I felt that this was important, rather than them having to click on each video and have a look and go, is this for me? Or maybe the start of the video wouldn't quite tell them what was coming later. You don't want people switching off after a couple of minutes and missing your key information. So we got every presenter to create their blurb, which would tell them what was going to be within the presentation. So when I started the conference, this was the little video that I used, and I wanted to show it to you just now, just so you can see our West Lothian team. Again, this is very different. Normally, we would be in person with the people. I didn't want everyone to have to introduce themselves live. I wanted to use something that we'd created and that we then had to use in the future. So hopefully this gives you a wee picture.
Zoe, there's no sound to your video.
Okay, sorry, Richard, I wonder what have I not pressed that I needed to press.
As you said, there's always technical stuff happening.
There's always something. There's always something. Wait a minute, I'll stop the share. Oh no, wait, mute.
Part of the options when you share is share sound as well as video at the bottom of your screen when you start sharing. So,
oh, there we go. Let's try again. Sorry about that, everyone. If you can just let me know if this works now.
Konnichiwa. My name is Jude Duncan and I'm a class teacher at Peel Primary School, and I'm also part of the 1+2 development team in West Lothian. This year I'm most looking forward to continuing to work with the Inverarmond cluster and also developing family engagement in 1+2 throughout West Lothian.
Ni hao, my name is Michael Devania. I'm a class teacher at St Mary's Primary School in Bathgate, and I'm part of the 1+2 development team. This year I'm looking forward to leading the St Kent Against cluster and coordinating the audit. Bye for now.
My name is Kate Finlater and I'm part of the 1+2 development team within West Lothian. I am primarily foremost a primary teacher, but I am also extremely enthusiastic regarding modern languages. I am here to help you with anything if I can. Please get in touch if you require any support. Thank you.
Guten Tag, ich heiße Frau McLean. Hi, my name is Linda McLean. I am a French and German teacher at West Calder High School, and I am also part of the Languages 1+2 team in West Lothian Council. I work with the West Calder cluster and also have a special interest in German, so would really like to try and get some German into the authority and keep it going in the schools that it already happens in. I also really look forward this year to putting languages on the map in West Lothian Council and to continue all the good work that has already been put in over the past few years.
Hola, I am Paola Cabezudo.
I'm a mother languages teacher at Dean's Community High School. I'm also part of the Wesleyan 1+2 team. This year, I am very looking forward to keep on supporting all our primary school teachers and pupils in order to build up enthusiasm, confidence, and capacity to teach and learn languages happily and successfully. Gracias.
Привет, I'm Zoe Gordon. I'm the 1+2 Development Officer, and I am most looking forward to this year working with lots of different schools in West Lothian and helping you on your language learning journey. Merci.
Okay, so that basically was what we used to introduce the session. Then I took them through just a few different things that we were going to be working on and coming up with that term. Now I want to show you our workshop location and where we held all the different workshops. So you can see here, this is our West Lothian SharePoint. And basically what I did was I got a tile created in here for the annual conference, and that's where people would access the workshops. So I just put the links everywhere so that, you know, on the Teams page where we held it, so we held the conference on a Teams page, everyone signed up to that Teams page. I added all the lead learners by default, and then we added anyone else we needed, and on there the links directly came to the SharePoint here so that they knew where to go for the workshops. Let me just take you now to the our SharePoint. I'm going to show you that, and I will let you have a little look at what it looks like for us. Okay, let me just share that. Okay, so within the little link you came to, so they would click on here, and then there were tiles made for each one. So when I uploaded them, I just uploaded each individual presentation into here. So the 19 presentations were in here, and there were a wide variety, as I say, with lots of different things. So when they wanted to access it, so I'll show you the PowerLanguage one here that Richard and the team created for me. They would just click on it, and then they would be able to access it, just like this.
Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue. We are delighted to be joining you today for this virtual.
Okay, so that's just an example of how it works, and it was really useful because, as I say, these exist now for everybody. I'm going to keep them on probably for as long as, but this, for example, so Richard's guide there for PowerLanguage, what I'm able to do now is, I was doing some training sessions in schools last week, and I'm able to say to them, if they say, oh, we're not quite sure how to use it, or they're new to the authority and things, I can refer them to this video and say, look, for the first 13 minutes, there's a very good summary of what to do. And then it goes on to the new things that Richard was sharing with us. So these are training resources as well. I think, you know, we created them for the conference, but they go beyond the conference. And that's what I think is very exciting, and what I was really pleased about. So that's what our site looked like. I'm going to just show you again. I'll go back to my presentation just to finish off where we were at. So we got some really good feedback. And so did my new format work? Well, you could see there from my stats that the traffic on our SharePoint was up. In terms of unique viewers, I had 157, which, I mean, we'd had nowhere near that before. And then the site visits was up 559%. That was in the week from the conference happening to the week after. So for me, that shows how successful that was. I also have gathered some stats. Now, they've got till this Friday to submit their feedback because I wanted to give them a couple of weeks to look at the sessions. So not everyone has given me feedback yet. So this is just an initial view of the feedback. But once I've got everything in, I will be looking to analyse that more. But we did have, as Risha said, around 150 of our primary and secondary teachers engaged with the sessions. Now, we were very lucky in West Lothian. They have a requirement for secondary teachers to attend 3 different sessions throughout the year. They're mandatory sessions. This was one of them. So that did mean that there were quite a few secondary teachers who did come along to it and engage with the sessions. 90% of them said that the session met or exceeded their expectations, so the conference as a whole. 85% of them said it met or exceeded their training requirements. And again, you know, if I did things differently, I didn't ask what their training requirements were. We guessed at that because we kind of had an idea what we wanted to do at our conference, and we just took it a bit further. 100% of them attended 2 or more workshops. So they mainly attended the core 2 that were live, but they attended others as well. And again, as I say, I'm gathering feedback because I wanted to give them time to access those in their own time. And 91% would like the same format for our January meeting. So we're considering doing the same thing again in January when we normally all meet together, since that's maybe unlikely. Some quotes from the teachers. So I'll let you read those yourselves, but I was really pleased with you know, the way that they liked it. They really liked the format. They liked that it was different. You know, I feel much more knowledgeable about various 1+2 opportunities and expectations in West Lothian now. You can reach a lot more people online. I like we can take seminars at a time to suit us. That was huge feedback from lots of people. They loved the fact that for them, if they had children, if they had other things they needed to do, it could fit around them. If they worked part-time, I had people who say, I don't work on a Friday. They accessed it at the weekend or on the Monday or when they wanted to. That really worked. And all the workshops were useful. I'll be able to use these techniques in my classroom. So that's what you're looking for. You want them to take something away and use it. And if you've done that, then I think you've done a good job. So what are my next steps to continue to develop the online training that we're offering for this year? So not just in this format, but some other bite-sized sessions, language learning, etc. Start planning an event for next session based on our feedback. Ensure sound on live recordings. When I recorded my live recordings, I had no sound. I had tried everything and I thought I had it perfect, but I made a wee mistake there. But everyone always, there's something that goes wrong, and I think you just go with it. There's no point worrying about it. And ensure a variety of presentations to suit the current needs. So ask them what they're looking for so that I can make sure that I'm meeting everyone's needs. And include cluster working as part of the agenda. It's something we do in West Lothian, and that wasn't part of that event because we needed to launch all of this, but our one in January will definitely include that. These are my contact details if anybody wants to get in touch and ask me any questions. Obviously, you can ask some questions now as well. But I hope that was useful, and thanks again for letting me present.
That was great, Zoe. Thank you very much. You can stop the sharing of your screen now. There is one question, Zoe, which we picked up in the Q&A. Somebody was saying, can people access, this is GLOW, by the way, for non-Scottish colleagues or colleagues who don't work in Scotland. What we saw was the internet that I've mentioned before called GLOW that all schools, Scottish schools can use. Can other people access your workshops, Zoe? It was one of the questions.
So they wouldn't be able to access it via our SharePoint, I think, unless they were in GLOW. But I'm sure if there was a particular workshop they were interested in, they could contact me and I could contact whoever made it to see if they're happy to share it.
That's great, thanks. Again, plenty of positive feedback, Zoe. You can see that, I think, in the chat. There's a lot of people saying thank you very much.
Yeah,
as always,
sorry, Risha, what the start of the question was, is there something similar available through colleagues in other councils, in other local authorities? I don't know if anyone
yes, well,
on
please.
the chat.
answer on the chat if you can. Thanks, Elise. I was going to say this is almost the end now of the session. Normally it's a full day. Again, I think good practice maybe for online training or online conferences. We can't go all day. I think everybody would get Zoom fatigue. But what we try to achieve today, as always, whether it's face-to-face or online, is really to share best practice, what people do around different countries, and also combine that with what we do, PowerLanguage, what we try to share, what we try to offer, the new ideas that we try to develop. So I hope everybody got something out of this. I think there's a wee poll coming your way, Elise, is that right?
Yeah, we need to ask Leo to send the poll. Here we go. So we're looking to see what
so Leo is sending a poll.
What PowerLanguage products do you use most regularly? So just to see who uses what. I think you can tick more than one. But...
Okay, so if you can answer that poll, that would be great. If you want to stay with us in 5 minutes, we'll go back to the Zoom meeting that we had for the coffee break. You're welcome to join us. We're going to have a bite to eat, maybe a bottle of wine. No, it's too early for wine. But before we do that, I think Rose has some housekeeping to do, but on behalf of the team, I think Nadine is with us as well. I'm not sure she can talk. I know she can hear.
She's back. If there's also any questions for us in the Q&A, if you have any questions for the team.
And what I would like to say, though, is a big thank you for the presenters. Great. Some great presentations, inspiring presentations, some things which hopefully people will be able to copy, adapt to their own local needs and context. Rose, any housekeeping?
So I'll be in touch with everyone as a follow-up email. So we'll share the chat and the Q&A and we'll answer as much as we can. And I'll give you the link to the PowerLanguage YouTube channel so you can watch anything again from this morning or share with your colleagues. I think that's it.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions, you know where to find any one of us for info@powerlanguage.net, and we'll get back to you.
And I think there's also a survey coming up when you leave the meeting, or do we know anything about the survey?
Yeah, when you leave the conference just now, the webinar, you will be redirected to a little link to a survey. Did you link to this conference?